Pandemic Protocol. Chapter 1. Into the Zone. The night air whistles past James Harrington's ears as he plummets through the darkness, the lights of a once vibrant London sprawling beneath him like a constellation of dying stars. His heart pounds against his ribs, a staccato rhythm that matches the adrenaline surging through his veins. This isn't his first covert insertion, but it's undoubtedly the most perilous. He tugs his night vision goggles into place, the world blooming into eerie shades of green. The familiar landmarks of the city loom below, now twisted and broken, a grotesque parody of their former glory. Big Ben's clock face gapes, hands frozen at the moment the quarantine fell. The London Eye stands sentinel over the Thames, its pods empty and rusting. James checks his altimeter. 5,000 feet. 4,000. The wind howls, drowning out the ambient sounds of the infected city. He strains his ears, knowing that soon enough he'll hear them. The moans, the screams, the sounds of a metropolis turned into a nightmare. At 2,000 feet he pulls the ripcord. The parachute deploys with a satisfying whoosh, the sudden deceleration making his stomach lurch. As he drifts towards the earth, James scans the immediate area for a safe landing zone. The mission brief had designated a small park near the edge of the quarantine zone, but plans rarely survive first contact with reality. A glint of movement catches his eye, something stirring in the shadows of a nearby building, multiple somethings. James curses under his breath. Volatiles, the most dangerous of the infected, active only at night. He'd hoped to avoid them until he'd at least touched down. Adjusting his trajectory, James steers towards a different landing zone, the roof of a nearby office building. It's not ideal, but it's better than dropping into the middle of a volatile hunting pack. The wind shifts, carrying with it the first sounds of the infected. A chorus of inhuman shrieks and growls that makes the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The roof rushes up to meet him. James bends his knees, bracing for impact. He hits the concrete hard, rolling to disperse the force of the landing. Pain lances through his shoulder, but he ignores it, scrambling to his feet and hurriedly gathering his parachute. Can't leave any evidence of his arrival. A blood-curdling screech pierces the air. James whirls around, heart hammering. A volatile crouches on a neighbouring rooftop, its mutated form silhouetted against the moon. It hasn't seen him yet, but it's alert, sensing the disturbance in its territory. James moves silently towards the roof access door, every nerve in his body screaming for him to run. But he knows better. Sudden movements will only draw attention. He reaches the door, grasping the handle. It's locked. Another screech, closer this time. James risks a glance over his shoulder. The volatile is on the move, leaping from rooftop to rooftop with inhuman agility. It's only a matter of seconds before it reaches him. He abandons stealth, ramming his shoulder against the door. Once, twice. On the third try, the lock gives way with a resounding crack. James tumbles inside, slamming the door shut behind him just as a heavy thud lands on the roof. Darkness envelops him. James fumbles for his flashlight, flicking it on. The beam illuminates a stairwell thick with dust and cobwebs. He descends quickly, the sounds of the volatile's rage fading behind him. At the bottom of the stairs, James pauses to catch his breath and take stock of his situation. He's inside the quarantine zone, but not where he's supposed to be. His shoulder throbs from the impact with the door, and somewhere above, a creature straight out of a nightmare is hunting him. "Welcome to London," he mutters grimly, checking his weapons. The familiar weight of his sidearm is reassuring, but he knows bullets are a last resort here. Gunshots will only attract more infected. James activates his comms units, speaking in a low voice. "Control, this is Harrington. I've made insertion but off target. Currently in an office building near." He checks his GPS. "Canary Wharf? Encountered volatiles upon landing?" proceeding to find secure location and establish contact with local assets. Static crackles in his ear before a response comes through. Understood, Harrington. Proceed with caution. Remember, your cover as an aid worker must remain intact. Make contact with Emily Foster's group as soon as possible. They're your best chance of navigating the zone safely. Copy that, James replies, already moving deeper into the building. He needs to find a defensible position, somewhere he can hole up until dawn. Then he can worry about making contact with Foster's people and beginning his real mission, tracking down the stolen research data that could be the key to ending this nightmare. As he moves through abandoned offices, James can't shake the feeling that he's being watched. Shadows seem to move in his peripheral vision, gone when he turns to look. The silence is oppressive, broken only by the occasional distant scream or the settling of the building around him. He finds a suitable room on the 10th floor, a corner office with a good view of the surrounding area and only one entry point. James barricades the door with a heavy desk, then settles in by the window to observe the city. London stretches out before him, a wasteland of abandoned vehicles and crumbling infrastructure. In the distance, a pillar of smoke rises, marking some unseen conflagration. The streets below are eerily empty, but James knows it's an illusion. Come daybreak, the infected will emerge, the slower, less dangerous ones that can tolerate sunlight. As the adrenaline of his insertion fades, exhaustion creeps in. James fights it, knowing he can't afford to lower his guard. Instead, he reviews his mission parameters, committing every detail to memory. Somewhere in this forsaken city is the stolen data from Project Sunlight, research that could lead to a cure for the Harron virus. His job is to find it, and the man who took it, Malcolm Sinclair, former Member of Parliament, turned self-styled saviour of the quarantine zone. But James knows the truth. Sinclair is no saviour. He's using the chaos of the outbreak to build his own power base, manipulating survivors and infected alike for his own gain. And if he succeeds in weaponizing the virus, as intelligence suggests he's attempting, the consequences will be catastrophic. A sudden movement in the street below catches James's attention. A small group of survivors moving quickly and quietly through the shadows. They're well organized, clearly experienced in navigating the dangers of the zone. James watches them intently. Could this be Foster's group? He's tempted to try and make contact, but caution holds him back. He doesn't know the lay of the land yet, doesn't understand the delicate power dynamics at play. One wrong move could blow his cover or worse, get him killed. No, better to wait for daylight. He'll make his way to the known territory of Foster's group then, under the guise of a newly arrived aid worker seeking shelter. It's not ideal. Every hour of delay is an hour Sinclair could be advancing his plans, but it's the safest play. As the night wears on, James allows himself to doze fitfully, never fully surrendering to sleep. His dreams, when they come, are fragmented and unsettling. Visions of London burning, of people he's sworn to protect transforming into snarling monsters before his eyes. He jolts awake as the first rays of dawn creep over the horizon. The city is quiet now, the night's terrors retreating to their lairs. But James knows the day holds its own dangers. Gathering his gear, he prepares to venture out into the quarantine zone. His mission has begun in earnest now. Find Sinclair, recover the data, stop the virus from being weaponized, and somehow, in the midst of it all, stay alive. James takes a deep breath, steeling himself for what's to come. Then he removes the barricade from the door and steps out into the unknown, ready to face whatever horrors await him in the ruins of London. Chapter 2. Contact. The morning sun casts long shadows across the desolate streets of London as James Harrington emerges from the office building. He squints against the light, his eyes adjusting after hours of darkness. The city looks different by day, no less dangerous, but the dangers are more visible now. James moves cautiously, staying close to the buildings and avoiding open spaces. His fabricated identity as an aid worker feels paper-thin in the harsh reality of the quarantine zone. Every sound makes him tense. Every movement in his peripheral vision sends a jolt of adrenaline through his system. As he navigates through the abandoned streets, signs of the outbreak's devastation are everywhere. Overturned cars block intersections, their windows smashed and interiors ransacked. Makeshift barricades of furniture and debris hint at desperate last stands, and everywhere the unmistakable dark stains of old blood. A sudden movement catches James's eye. He ducks behind a rusted-out bus, hand instinctively going to his concealed sidearm. Peering around the edge, he sees a small group of infected shambling down the street. Biters, the most common and least dangerous type of infected. Slow, but relentless. James holds his breath as they pass, their vacant eyes staring blankly ahead. One trips over a discarded suitcase, falling to the ground with a sickening crunch. The others pay it no mind, continuing their mindless wandering. Once they're out of sight, James continues on, his destination clear in his mind. Intelligence reports had pinpointed Emily Foster's group operating out of a repurposed skyscraper in the financial district. It's not far, but in this environment, every block is a gauntlet. As he approaches the edge of the financial district, the urban landscape changes. The buildings here are taller, their glass facades reflecting the morning sun. But many of those facades are shattered now, the streets below littered with shards that crunch under James's boots. He rounds a corner and freezes. There, rising above the surrounding buildings, is his target, a sleek skyscraper that seems remarkably intact compared to its neighbours. But what catches James's attention are the modifications. Makeshift bridges connect it to adjacent buildings. Platforms and zip lines crisscross between balconies, and at various levels he can see figures moving about, keeping watch. This has to be it, Foster's base of operations. James takes a deep breath, steeling himself for the next phase of his mission. He steps out into the open, hands raised to show he's unarmed. It's a calculated risk, but one he has to take to establish his cover. "Hello," he calls out, pitching his voice to Carrie. "I'm looking for help. I'm with the World Health Organization." For a long moment there's no response. Then a voice crackles to life, emanating from a hidden speaker system. "Stay where you are. Don't move." James complies, keeping his hands visible. He can feel unseen eyes on him, assessing the threat he might pose. Minutes tick by. James remains still, even as his instincts scream at him to find cover. Finally the voice returns. "All right, we're sending someone down. If you make any sudden moves, you'll be shot." "Understand." "Understood," James replies calmly. The lobby doors of the skyscraper open and 3 figures emerge. They move with the practiced caution of those long accustomed to danger. As they draw closer, James can make out more details. 2 men and a woman, all armed, all watching him warily. The woman steps forward. She's in her early 30s, with short-cropped hair and eyes that scan James with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "I'm Emily Foster," she says. "You said you're with the WHO." James nods, falling easily into his cover persona. "James Harrington. I'm part of a team sent to assess the situation inside the quarantine zone. My insertion went wrong. I got separated from my group." Emily's eyes narrow. "The WHO hasn't sent anyone in months. Why now?" "New initiative," James lies smoothly. "There's been progress on potential treatments. We need up-to-date information on the state of the outbreak." One of the men scoffs. "Bit late for that, isn't it? We've been trapped in here for over a year." "Quiet, Zach," Emily says, not taking her eyes off James. She seems to come to a decision. "All right, Mr. Harrington, you can come with us. But you'll be under guard until we can verify your story." "Clear." James nods. Crystal clear, thank you. They lead him into the building through a series of security checkpoints that would put most military installations to shame. James takes it all in, noting defensive positions, guard rotations, and potential weaknesses. It's second nature to him, even as he maintains his facade of an overwhelmed aid worker. The elevator ride is tense, no one speaking as they ascend. James can feel the others watching him, waiting for him to make a wrong move. He keeps his body language open, non-threatening. They exit onto what must have once been an executive floor. Now, it's a bustling command centre. Makeshift workstations are set up, people hurrying back and forth with purpose. Maps of London cover one wall, sectioned off and annotated with information James can't quite make out from this distance. Emily leads him to a small conference room, gesturing for him to sit. The two men take up positions by the door. "All right, Mr. Harrington," Emily says, sitting across from him. "Let's hear your story. All of it." James launches into his prepared narrative, weaving truth and fiction together seamlessly. He talks about the CHO's renewed interest in the London outbreak, about the promise of new treatments. He expresses shock at the conditions inside the zone, feigning ignorance about the true extent of the devastation. As he speaks, he watches Emily's reactions carefully. She's good, her face reveals little. But James is better, picking up on the micro-expressions that betray her thoughts. Skepticism, yes, but also a flicker of hope when he mentions potential treatments. When he finishes, Emily is quiet for a long moment. Then she leans forward, her voice low and intense. "I want to believe you, I really do, but you have to understand our position. We've been abandoned here, left to die by the very organizations that promise to help us. The military shoots anyone who tries to leave. The gangs fight over what little resources are left. And the infected." She trails off, a haunted look in her eyes. James nods sympathetically. "I can't imagine what you've been through. But I'm here now. I want to help." Emily studies him for another long moment before seeming to come to a decision. "All right, we'll give you a chance, but you'll be watched. And if we catch even a hint that you're not who you say you are." The threat hangs in the air, unspoken but clear. "I understand," James says. "Thank you for your trust." Emily stands. "Come on, I'll show you around, give you an idea of what we're dealing with here." As they exit the conference room, a young woman hurries up to Emily, her face tight with concern. "Em, we've got a problem. The enforcers are making a push into Guardian territory. It's getting ugly." Emily curses under her breath. "All right, gather the team. We need to contain this before it spills over into our area." She turns to James. "Looks like you're going to get a crash course in zone politics, Mr. Harrington. Follow me." As they hurry towards the command centre, James's mind races. Enforcers, Guardians. The factions he'd been briefed on are clearly active and in conflict. It's a volatile situation, but one that might provide opportunities to gather the intelligence he needs. They reach the main map, now surrounded by a group of intense-looking individuals. Emily starts barking orders, and James watches, absorbing every detail. He's made contact, established his cover. Now the real work begins. Somewhere in this chaos is the key to stopping Sinclair and recovering the stolen research. And James is determined to find it, no matter the cost. Chapter 3. The Tower. The command center buzzes with activity as Emily Foster barks orders, her team responding with practiced efficiency. James Harrington stands to the side, observing keenly while maintaining his facade of an overwhelmed aid worker. The large map of London dominates the room, its surface a patchwork of territories marked in different colours. "Zoe, I need you to coordinate with our lookouts," Emily says, addressing a woman with close-cropped hair and steady hands. "If the enforcers push any further east, I want to know about it." Zoe nods, already moving towards a bank of jury-rigged communications equipment. James makes a mental note she seems to be Emily's second-in-command. "Isaac," Emily continues, turning to a wiry young man with thick glasses, "run the numbers. How long can we go without access to the eastern supply routes?" Isaac's fingers fly over a battered laptop. "If we ration carefully, maybe 2 weeks. After that, things get dicey." Emily's jaw tightens. "Not good enough. We need options." As the team disperses to their tasks, Emily turns back to James. "Sorry about that. Welcome to life in the zone, Mr. Harrington. Come on, I'll give you the tour." They exit the command center, entering a stairwell that shows signs of heavy fortification. Metal plates reinforce the doors, and James spots tripwires and other, less obvious security measures. "We call this place the Tower," Emily explains as they descend. "It's our home, our fortress, and sometimes our prison. We've got about 200 people living here, plus another 100 or so in satellite camps we protect. They emerge onto a floor that's been converted into a massive hydroponic garden. Row upon row of plants grow under artificial lights, tended by people of all ages. Impressive," James says, genuinely amazed. "You're completely self-sufficient." Emily shakes her head. "Not quite. We trade with other groups for things we can't produce. But this keeps us fed and gives people purpose. That's just as important for survival." As they move through the building, James is struck by the ingenuity on display. Every floor has been repurposed. Living quarters, workshops, even a school for the few children in the community. But he also notes the omnipresent signs of danger, weapon caches hidden in plain sight, evacuation plans posted at regular intervals, people moving with the hyper-awareness of those used to constant threat. They pause on a floor dedicated to medical care. A woman in a stained lab coat approaches, her face lined with exhaustion. "James, this is Dr. Zoe Chambers, our Chief Medical Officer," Emily introduces. "Zoe, James claims to be from the WHO, says they're working on new treatments." Zoe's eyes light up with cautious hope. "Is that true? We're running dangerously low on antivirals, and the latest mutation is resisting our current protocols." James nods, threading truth into his cover story. "There's promising research, but it's early days. That's part of why I'm here, to gather data on the current state of the outbreak." "Well, you've come to the right place," Zoe says grimly. "I can show you our latest case files, but fair warning, it's not pretty." Before James can respond, an alarm blares through the building. Emily curses, already moving. "Perimeter breach! Come on." They race down the stairs, Emily talking rapidly into a radio clipped to her shoulder. They burst out onto a lower floor, and James gets his first clear view of the street below. A group of biters has broken through a barricade, shambling towards the building's entrance. "Damn it," Emily mutters. "That barricade was supposed to hold for another week. We don't have the ammo to deal with this right now." James makes a split-second decision. It's risky, but it's a chance to cement his place in the group and gather more intel. "I can help," he says. "I've had training in infected containment protocols." Emily eyes him skeptically but nods. "All right, Zach, get him geared up, and watch his back." Minutes later, James finds himself on the street. Armed with a reinforced crowbar and a backpack full of firecrackers, apparently an effective distraction for biters. Zach flanks him, wielding a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. "Remember," Zach growls, "noise attracts them. We do this quiet and fast." James nods, then springs into action. He dashes towards an abandoned car, vaulting over its hood with fluid grace. A biter lunges for him, jaws gnashing. James sidesteps, bringing the crowbar down on its skull with a sickening crunch. Zach whistles low. Not bad for a pencil pusher. They work their way through the infected. James's movements a deadly dance of parkour and precise strikes. He leaps from car to car, uses walls to redirect his momentum, always staying just out of reach of grasping hands and snapping teeth. When they reach the broken barricade, James quickly assesses the situation. "We need to funnel them," he says. "Got any chain-link fencing?" Zack grins, catching on. "There's a hardware store down the block. Cover me." As Zack runs for supplies, James uses the firecrackers to draw the remaining biters away from the tower's entrance. He leads them on a merry chase, always staying just ahead, conserving his energy. When Zack returns with fencing and zip ties, they work together to create a makeshift corral, trapping the biters in a dead-end alley. The last one falls to James's crowbar, just as Emily and her team arrive with more permanent barricade materials. "Impressive work," Emily says, eyeing James with newfound respect. "Where did you say you trained again?" "Who Crisis Response Team," James lies smoothly. "We have to be prepared for anything." As they walk back to the tower, James can feel the shift in how the others perceive him. He's no longer just a potential liability, he's proven his worth. It's a crucial step in his mission, but it also complicates things. These people are survivors, fighters. And despite himself, James is beginning to admire them. Back inside, Emily leads him to a small office. "Get cleaned up," she says, gesturing to a basin of water. "Then meet me in the command center. I think it's time we had a real talk about what's going on in the zone." As she leaves, James allows himself a moment to breathe. He's made progress, but he's also acutely aware of the tightrope he's walking. Every lie, every half-truth, is a potential disaster. And somewhere out there, Malcolm Sinclair is moving forward with his plans. James splashes water on his face, washing away grime and infected blood. When he looks in the cracked mirror, he sees not just his own reflection, but the weight of his mission. Find the stolen research. Stop Sinclair. Save these people if he can. With a deep breath, he straightens his shoulders and heads for the command center. It's time to dive deeper into the dangerous waters of the London quarantine zone. Chapter 4. Sinclair's Shadow. The command center hums with tension as James enters. Emily stands at the central map, her face etched with concern. She nods to James, gesturing him over. "All right, Harrington, you've proven you can handle yourself out there. Time to bring you up to speed on what we're really dealing with." Emily's finger traces a line across the map, outlining territories. The zone's split between three main factions. Us, the Tower. We try to keep some semblance of normalcy, protect our people. Then there's the Enforcers. Her expression darkens. Ex-military mostly, led by a bastard named Blackwood. They rule through fear, hoard supplies. James nods, filing away the information. And the third, the Guardians, Emily says, her tone loaded with complexity. Led by Malcolm Sinclair. Former MP, now styling himself as the zone's saviour. Saviour. James prompts, careful to keep his tone neutral. Emily's laugh is bitter. That's his pitch. Promises order protection. Even claims he's working on a cure. But there's something off about the whole operation. People who join the Guardians, they change, become fanatics. James leans in, his interest piqued. "You think Sinclair's up to something?" "I know he is," Emily says firmly. "We've lost good people trying to figure out what. But whatever it is, it's big, and I'm betting your Who friends would be very interested. It's a perfect opening and James seizes it. I'd like to look into it. If Sinclair has information about the virus, it could be crucial." Emily studies him for a long moment, then nods. "All right, we've identified a Guardian outpost on the edge of their territory. Small, lightly guarded. Good place to start digging. But you'll need backup." She gestures to a man lounging in the corner, sharpening a wicked-looking knife. "Raj will go with you. He knows the area, and he's good in a fight." Raj stands, grinning. "Just try to keep up, yeah." An hour later, James and Raj are moving silently through the shadowy streets of what was once a bustling financial district. The looming skyscrapers, Their windows, dark and empty, create an urban canyon that amplifies every sound. Guardian territory starts 2 blocks ahead, Raj whispers. They're not as trigger-happy as the enforcers, but don't let your guard down. James nods, his senses on high alert. They stick to the shadows, avoiding open spaces. As they near the reported location of the outpost, James notices subtle changes. The streets are cleaner, the barricades more organised. Posters appear on walls, bearing Sinclair's face and slogans promising safety and order. There, Raj points to a squat office building. 2 guards stand at the entrance, alert but not overly tense. That's our target. What's the play? James assesses the situation quickly. We need a distraction, something to draw them away from the entrance. Raj grins, pulling out a small homemade device. Way ahead of you, mate. One noisemaker coming up. He activates it and tosses it down a side street. The device emits a series of shrieks and growls, a perfect imitation of infected. The guards tense, exchanging worried looks. After a brief discussion, one of them moves to investigate the sound. Now's our chance, James whispers. They move swiftly, hugging the shadows. James reaches the remaining guard first, subduing him with a quick, efficient chokehold. Raj zip-ties the unconscious man and drags him out of sight. Inside, the building is eerily quiet. James moves cautiously, aware that every second increases their risk of discovery. The first floor yields nothing of interest, standard supplies, a few weapons. Up we go, Raj mutters, gesturing to the stairs. On the second floor they hit pay dirt, a room filled with communications equipment, far more sophisticated than anything James has seen in the zone so far. Raj stands guard at the door, while James quickly scans the equipment, snapping photos with a small camera. Sinclair's been a busy boy, Raj comments. This tech is military grade. James nods, his mind racing. How did Sinclair get his hands on this level of equipment? And more importantly, what is he using it for? A file cabinet in the corner catches his eye. James picks the lock swiftly, rifling through the contents. Most of it is mundane, supply logs, patrol schedules, but one folder, labelled simply Project Oracle, makes him pause. Inside are fragments of research notes, chemical formulas James doesn't fully understand, but one phrase jumps out at him: genetic resequencing of the Harrington strain. Jackpot, James murmurs. Suddenly Raj tenses. Company, he hisses. Footsteps approach from the stairwell. James quickly photographs the contents of the folder, then replaces it exactly as he found it. He and Raj duck into an adjacent room just as 2 Guardian members enter the communications centre. Sinclair wants the latest test results sent to the lab as soon as possible, one of them is saying. Says we're close to a breakthrough. You really think he can do it? The other asks. Create a cure. The first Guardian laughs. Cure? Nah, mate. What Sinclair's cooking up is way better than a cure. It's the next step in human evolution. You'll see. James and Raj exchange alarmed glances. This is bigger than they'd anticipated. The Guardians soon leave, and James and Raj make their escape. They're nearly clear when an alarm blares through the compound. Their absence has been discovered. Time to run, Raj says grimly. What follows is a heart-pounding chase through Guardian territory. James and Raj use every trick in their arsenal, parkour, misdirection, even using infected as impromptu roadblocks for their pursuers. They vault over barricades, scramble up fire escapes, and at one point swing across a gap between buildings on a frayed electrical cable. Finally, lungs burning and muscles screaming, they reach the edge of tower territory. Only when they're safely inside the perimeter does James allow himself to relax slightly. Emily is waiting for them in the command centre, her face a mix of relief and anticipation. Well, what did you find? James takes a deep breath. Sinclair's up to something big. He's not working on a cure, he's trying to modify the virus. And from what we overheard, his goals are ambitious. He relays everything they discovered. The advanced equipment, the cryptic research notes. The overheard conversation. With each detail, Emily's expression grows more concerned. "This is worse than we thought," she says finally. "If Sinclair succeeds in weaponizing the virus," she trails off, the implications hanging heavy in the air. James nods grimly. "We need to find out more. Where's Sinclair conducting these experiments? What's his endgame?" Emily turns to the map, her eyes scanning the Guardian territory. "There's an old pharmaceutical lab in their sector. We've always wondered why they guard it so heavily. Could be where Sinclair's set up shop." "Then that's our next target," James says. As the team begins to plan their next move, James's mind races. The stolen research, Sinclair's experiments, the whose interest, it's all connected, he's sure of it. But how? And more importantly, how can he complete his mission without betraying the trust of Emily and her people? As night falls over the quarantine zone, James stares out a window, watching distant fires flicker on the horizon. Somewhere out there, Malcolm Sinclair is playing a dangerous game with forces he can't possibly understand. And James is the only one who can stop him. The weight of his mission settles heavily on his shoulders. But as he turns back to join the others, James allows himself a grim smile. He's made progress. He's one step closer to unraveling the mystery. And in this deadly game of cat and mouse, every step counts. Chapter 5. Underground Network. The rusty gate of the underground station groans as James forces it open, the sound echoing ominously through the darkness beyond. He flicks on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom to reveal stairs descending into blackness. "You sure about this?" Raj asks, peering over James's shoulder. "The underground's crawling with stalkers, nasty buggers." James nods grimly. Emily's intel suggests the black market's operating out of Charing Cross Station. If we want to know more about Sinclair's operation, that's our best bet. Raj sighs, checking his weapon. Right then, into the belly of the beast we go. They descend carefully, every step measured to minimize noise. The air grows thick and stale, heavy with the scent of decay and something else, something alien and deeply wrong. At the bottom of the stairs, they pause to get their bearings. The once bustling station is a shadow of its former self. Abandoned luggage litters the floor, silent testaments to the panic of evacuation. Faded posters advertise a world that no longer exists. "This way," James whispers, gesturing towards the tunnels. We follow the Piccadilly line to Leicester Square, then change to the Northern Line for Charing Cross. They move cautiously along the platform, stepping over debris and around long dead bodies. James tries not to look too closely at the corpses. Some show signs of violence, others the telltale mutations of the virus. As they near the tunnel entrance, a skittering sound echoes from the darkness. James and Raj freeze, exchanging alarmed glances. "Stalker!" Raj breathes, barely audible. James nods, his heart pounding. Stalkers, a particularly nasty mutation of the infected. Fast, agile, and worst of all, intelligent enough to set traps. Their eyes, adapted for the darkness of the underground, are hypersensitive to light. "Lights off," James whispers. "Night vision from here on out." They switch to their night vision goggles, the world transforming into shades of green. The darkness of the tunnel now seems alive, full of shifting shadows and potential threats. They enter the tunnel single file, James in the lead. The rails beneath their feet are slick with some unidentifiable substance, forcing them to step carefully. Water drips from the ceiling, each splash a potential giveaway of their position. They're halfway to Leicester Square when James holds up a hand, signalling Raj to stop. Ahead, barely visible in the green-tinted darkness, a shape moves with unnatural fluidity. The stalker clings to the ceiling, its elongated limbs and twisted body a mockery of human form. James assesses the situation quickly. The tunnel is too narrow to go around, and turning back isn't an option. They'll have to time this perfectly. He reaches into his pack, pulling out a small device, a UV flashbang designed specifically for encounters like this. He meets Raj's eyes, miming the plan. Raj nods in understanding. James counts down silently. 3, 2, 1. He tosses the device, averting his eyes as it detonates in a burst of ultraviolet light. The stalker shrieks, a sound of pure agony that sends chills down James's spine. In the moment of confusion, they run, feet pounding against the rails as they sprint past the disoriented creature. They don't stop running until they reach Leicester Square station. Panting, they take a moment to regroup. "Nice move," Raj says between breaths. "Where'd you learn that trick?" "Crisis response training," James lies smoothly. "Always be prepared, right?" They navigate the interchange to the Northern Line. The oppressive silence broken only by the occasional distant shriek or skittering of unseen creatures. James can feel the weight of the earth above them, the entire city pressing down. It's a struggle to keep claustrophobia at bay. Finally, they reach Charing Cross. Unlike the other stations they've passed, this one shows signs of habitation. Makeshift barricades guard the entrances to the platforms. Dim, battery-powered lights create islands of illumination in the darkness. A gruff voice calls out as they approach. "That's far enough, state your business." James raises his hands slowly. "We're here to trade. Looking for Marcus Green." There's a pause, then the sound of hushed conversation. Finally the voice returns. "Weapons on the ground, then you can come in." They comply and are quickly surrounded by a group of hard-eyed survivors. They're led through a maze of repurposed maintenance tunnels and storage rooms, eventually emerging into what was once the station's main concourse. The space has been transformed into a bustling marketplace. Stalls made from scavenged materials line the walls, selling everything from canned food to homemade weapons. The air is thick, with the smell of unwashed bodies and cooking meat of questionable origin. Their escort leads them to a small office overlooking the concourse. Inside, a man sits behind a desk made from an old ticket counter. He's in his late 40s, with sharp eyes that miss nothing and a smile that doesn't reach those eyes. "Welcome to the Undercity," he says. "I'm Marcus Green. I hear you're looking for information." James steps forward. "That's right. We need to know about Malcolm Sinclair's operation. Word is you're the man to ask." Marcus leans back, studying James intently. "Information's expensive these days, friend. What are you offering in trade?" James pulls out a small package. "Medical supplies, antibiotics, hard to come by down here, I imagine." Marcus's eyes light up with genuine interest. "Now that's a proper bargaining chip. All right, let's talk." Over the next hour, James carefully extracts information from Marcus, trading medical supplies and carefully sanitized intel from the surface. He learns that Sinclair's operation is indeed centered around the old pharmaceutical lab, as Emily had suspected. But more importantly, he discovers that Sinclair has been recruiting scientists and medical personnel, often by force. "Word is he's working on something big," Marcus says, leaning in conspiratorially. "Some kind of evolution of the virus. But here's the kicker. Rumor has it he's got someone on the inside of the military quarantine. How else could he get the kind of equipment he's bringing in?" James files this information away, his mind racing. A mole in the military could explain a lot, including how Sinclair got his hands on the stolen research data. As they prepare to leave, Marcus holds up a hand. "One more thing. Sinclair's people have been asking about some specific genetic markers, rare ones. They're looking for people with these markers, and they're not too picky about how they get them." James nods grimly. "Thanks for the information. You've been a big help." As they make their way back through the tunnels, James's mind is whirling with the implications of what they've learned. Sinclair's plans are more advanced than they'd realized, and the potential military connection adds a new layer of complexity to the mission. They're nearing the exit when Raj suddenly tenses. "You hear that?" James strains his ears. At first he hears nothing but the oppressive silence of the tunnels. Then a sound. Faint, but growing louder. The unmistakable noise of many feet, moving fast. "Run!" James says, his voice tight with urgency. They sprint through the tunnels, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. James's lungs burn, his muscles screaming in protest, but he doesn't dare slow down. One misstep, one moment of hesitation, and they're dead. They burst out of the underground station, emerging into the fading light of evening. Only when they're several blocks away, safely back in tower territory, do they allow themselves to stop. "Bloody hell," Raj gasps, doubling over. "What was that?" James shakes his head, still catching his breath. "Don't know. But I've got a feeling our little excursion didn't go unnoticed." As they make their way back to the tower, James can't shake the feeling that they've kicked a hornet's nest. Sinclair's operation is bigger and more dangerous than they'd imagined, and now it's likely they know someone's poking around. The game has changed, the stakes are higher, and as James looks out over the darkening city, he knows that time is running out. Chapter 6, Night Run. The setting sun paints London's broken skyline in hues of orange and red as James stands on the roof of the tower, surveying the city. The beauty of the moment is at odds with the danger he knows lurks in the lengthening shadows. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice says behind him. James turns to see Emily approaching, her face etched with a mix of weariness and determination. "Hard to believe this is the same city it was a year ago." James nods, his mind racing with the information they've gathered. "Emily, about Sinclair." She holds up a hand, cutting him off. "I know. Raj filled me in. It's worse than we thought." She sighs, running a hand through her short-cropped hair. "But right now we have more immediate concerns. Our medical supplies are running dangerously low. The antibiotics I traded to Marcus," James realizes. Emily nods. "We couldn't pass up the opportunity for intel. But now we're in a tight spot. There's a hospital on the edge of Enforcer territory. We know they have a stash of meds there." James sees where this is going. "You're planning a raid, a supply run," Emily corrects with a grim smile. "And I want you on it. The night runners are our best, but after what you've shown us, I think you'd be an asset." James knows he should focus on his mission, on tracking down Sinclair and the stolen research, but he also knows he needs to maintain his cover and build trust. Plus, the idea of letting these people go without vital medicine doesn't sit right with him. "I'm in," he says. An hour later, James finds himself gearing up with a small team of night runners. He recognizes Zach from his first day in the zone. Along with two others he's seen around the tower, a lithe woman introduced as Fiona, and a stocky bearded man named Bear. As they're doing final equipment checks, a young voice pipes up. "I'm coming too." James turns to see a boy no more than 14, with a mop of unruly hair and determined eyes. It's Charlie Watts, the young survivor he's seen helping out around the tower. Zach shakes his head firmly. "No way, Squirt. Too dangerous." Charlie's face sets in a stubborn line. "I know those streets better than any of you. And I'm small. I can get into spaces you can't. You need me." James watches the exchange with interest. There's something about Charlie, a resilience, a fire, that reminds him of himself at that age. Emily, who's overseeing the preparations, studies Charlie for a long moment. Then she nods. "All right. But you stay close to James. You follow his orders. Clear." Charlie's face lights up. Crystal clear. As they prepare to leave, Emily pulls James aside. "Keep him safe," she says quietly. He's important to all of us here." James nods, understanding the unspoken weight of this responsibility. They set out as true night falls, moving swiftly and silently through the ruins of London. James is impressed by the night runners' skill. They navigate the treacherous urban landscape with fluid grace, using parkour techniques to traverse obstacles and avoid danger. Charlie keeps pace surprisingly well, his small size allowing him to squeeze through gaps the adults have to go around. James keeps a close eye on him, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. They're halfway to the hospital when Fiona, on point, holds up a fist. Everyone freezes. "Virals," she whispers. "Pack of them coming this way." James's blood runs cold. Virals, the fast, aggressive strain of infected. If they're spotted, it'll be a fight for their lives. "Up," Zack commands. "Fire escape now." They scramble up a rusty fire escape, the metal groaning ominously under their weight. They've barely made it to the roof when the pack of virals rounds the corner below. James holds his breath, watching as the infected move through the street. Their jerky, unnatural movements send a shiver down his spine. For a moment, he thinks they're in the clear. Then Charlie's foot slips on a loose piece of gravel. The small stone clatters down the fire escape. The reaction is instantaneous. The virals' heads snap up, their milky eyes fixing on the group's position. With inhuman shrieks, they begin to scale the building. "Run!" Bear shouts. What follows is a heart-pounding chase across the rooftops of London. The night runners live up to their name, moving with incredible speed and agility. James keeps pace, his training kicking in as he vaults gaps between buildings and slides under obstacles. Charlie struggles to keep up, his shorter legs a disadvantage in this deadly race. Without breaking stride, James scoops the boy up, carrying him as they run. The virals are relentless, their mutated bodies allowing them to scale walls and leap distances that should be impossible. More than once, James feels clawed hands grasp at his heels, only to be pulled to safety at the last moment by one of the night runners. They're running out of rooftop. Ahead, a wide street separates them from the next building, too far to jump. "There!" Fiona shouts, pointing to a skeletal construction crane looming over the gap. They make for the crane, climbing its metal framework as the virals swarm below. James boosts Charlie up, then follows, his muscles burning with exertion. They reach the arm of the crane. It's their only way across, a narrow metal beam suspended high above the street. "Oh, no way," Bear mutters, eyeing the precarious crossing. But they have no choice. The virals are climbing the crane now, their inhuman shrieks growing closer. "I'll go first," Charlie says, his voice shaking but determined. Before anyone can stop him, he's out on the beam, arms outstretched for balance. James follows close behind, ready to grab the boy if he slips. The others bring up the rear, Zack pausing to cut one of the crane's cables. The arm shudders, tilting slightly. They're halfway across when the crane gives an ominous groan. The viral's weight is too much. The whole structure is starting to collapse. "Run!" James shouts. They sprint across the beam as it begins to tilt. Charlie stumbles, nearly falling. James grabs him, tucking the boy against his chest as he makes a desperate leap for the opposite roof. They land hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Behind them, the crane collapses with a thunderous crash, taking the virals with it. For a long moment they all lie there, gasping for breath. Then Charlie starts to laugh, a slightly hysterical sound born of relief and fading adrenaline. Soon they're all laughing, the shared brush with death creating a bond between them. As they catch their breath, James checks Charlie for injuries. "You okay, kid?" Charlie nods, his eyes shining with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "That was intense." James can't help but smile. "You did good out there. Kept your cool under pressure." The boy beams at the praise. "Thanks for saving me. I guess Emily was right to pair us up." As they prepare to continue their mission, James feels a newfound respect for the night runners and for Charlie. These people aren't just survivors, they're fighters, risking everything to keep their community alive. The hospital looms ahead, a dark silhouette against the night sky. They've made it this far, but James knows the real challenge is yet to come. As they approach, he can't shake the feeling that this supply run is about to become much more complicated. But for now, they move forward, a team forged in the crucible of the quarantine zone's dangers. Whatever comes next, they'll face it together. Chapter 7. St. Thomas's Siege. The imposing facade of St. Thomas's Hospital looms before them, its windows dark and ominous in the pre-dawn light. What was once a place of healing now stands as a monument to the devastation wrought by the virus. James crouches behind an overturned ambulance, surveying the scene. The night runners spread out around him, tense and alert. "Doesn't look good," Zach mutters. "Place is crawling with infected." James nods grimly. The courtyard in front of the hospital is teeming with biters, their shambling forms casting long shadows in the dim light. But it's not the biters that worry him, it's what might be lurking inside. "Remember," he says softly, "we're not just here for supplies. Emily's intel suggests there's a Dr. Sarah Collins still alive in there. Top virologist? If we can extract her, it could be a game-changer." Fiona raises an eyebrow. "Tall order, mate. You sure about this?" James meets her gaze steadily. "I'm sure. We split up. Bear, Fiona, you're on supply duty. Get what we need and get out. Zach, Charlie, you're with me. We find Dr. Collins." They nod, faces set with determination. James turns to Charlie, his voice low. "Stay close to me, kid. This is going to get rough." Charlie swallows hard but nods, his young face a mask of forced bravado. James takes a deep breath, steeling himself. "All right, let's do this." They move as one, swift and silent. James leads the charge, vaulting over the ambulance and sprinting towards the hospital entrance. The first biter that lunges for him goes down hard, James's combat knife finding the soft spot at the base of its skull. The courtyard erupts into chaos. Biters converge on them from all sides, their guttural moans filling the air. James moves with lethal efficiency, each strike precise and economical. Beside him, Zach wields his barbed wire bat with brutal effectiveness. They fight their way to the main entrance, Charlie proving his worth by darting between the infected, creating openings for James and Zach to exploit. As they reach the doors, Bear and Fiona peel off, heading for the supply wing. Inside, the hospital is a nightmare of dark corridors and overturned equipment. The smell of decay is overwhelming. James flicks on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom to reveal walls splattered with old blood. "Dr. Collins," he calls out, his voice echoing eerily. "Dr. Sarah Collins!" A crash from above makes them all jump. "Upstairs," Zach says. "Sounds like the ICU." They make their way up, every shadow a potential threat. The stairwell is a gauntlet of debris and bodies, some of which aren't as dead as they first appear. James dispatches 2 infected nurses silently, their mutated forms a grotesque parody of the uniforms they still wear. The ICU is a war zone. Beds are overturned, expensive medical equipment lies smashed on the floor. And in the centre of it all, a barricaded door shudders under the assault of multiple infected. "Help!" A woman's voice cries from behind the door. "Please, someone help!" James doesn't hesitate. He charges forward, Zach right behind him. They plough into the group of infected, creating space. Charlie, showing surprising strength, helps James shove a heavy crash cart against the door, buying them precious seconds. "Dr. Collins," James shouts. "We're here to help. Can you open the door?" There's a moment of tense silence, then the sound of furniture being moved. The door cracks open, revealing a woman in her late 30s, her lab coat stained with blood and worse. Her eyes are wild with fear and exhaustion. "Who are you?" she demands. "Friends," James says quickly. "We're getting you out of here." A howl from down the corridor cuts off any further discussion. James's blood runs cold. He knows that sound. "Virals," he says. "We need to move, now." Dr. Collins hesitates for just a moment, then nods, grabbing a bag from inside the room. "I have samples, research data. It's vital we don't lose it." James nods. "Stay between us. Charlie, keep close." They move back the way they came, but it's immediately clear their exit is cut off. Virals pour into the ICU, their mutated forms moving with terrifying speed. "New plan," James says, thinking fast. We need to find another way out. Dr. Collins pipes up. The roof! There's a helipad. If we can get there, maybe we can signal for help. It's a long shot, but it's all they've got. They run, the sounds of pursuit growing ever closer. James's mind races, trying to formulate a plan. They can't outrun the virals forever, and their ammunition is limited. As they round a corner, James spots a sign for the hospital's research wing. An idea forms. Dr. Collins, does this place have a UV decontamination chamber? She nods, understanding dawning in her eyes. Yes, in the clean room, but it's not designed as a weapon. It'll have to do, James says. Lead the way. They make a detour, bursting into the research wing. The clean room is at the far end, its reinforced door a welcome sight. But between them and safety is a gauntlet of infected hospital staff, their forms twisted by the virus. Get to the clean room, James orders. I'll hold them off. Before anyone can argue, he charges into the fray. James becomes a whirlwind of motion, his combat training taking over. He uses everything at his disposal. Surgical trays become improvised shields, IV stands become spears. Each movement flows into the next, a deadly dance that keeps the infected at bay. Through the chaos, he sees Zack ushering Doctor Collins and Charlie towards the clean room. They're almost there when a viral leaps from the shadows, tackling Zack to the ground. Charlie, showing incredible bravery, grabs a fire extinguisher and empties it into the viral's face. The creature reels back, stunned, giving Zack the opening he needs to finish it off. Go! James shouts, backing towards them as more infected pour into the room. They make it into the clean room, slamming the door shut just as the horde reaches them. For a moment they catch their breath, the infected pounding on the door outside. The UV system, James says. Can you rig it into something portable? Dr. Collins nods, already moving to the control panel. I think so. Give me a few minutes. Those minutes feel like hours as the door begins to buckle under the assault. But finally, Dr. Collins turns, holding what looks like a jury-rigged UV spotlight. It's not pretty, she says, but it should work. The UV radiation is strong enough to damage the infected cells. It won't kill them outright, but it'll hurt them, maybe drive them back. James takes the device, feeling its weight. It'll do. Everyone ready? They nod, faces set with determination. James takes a deep breath, then throws open the door, UV light blazing. The effect is immediate and horrifying. The infected shriek in agony, their skin blistering and smoking under the intense radiation. They recoil, creating a path. Move! James shouts, they run, James bringing up the rear, sweeping the UV light back and forth to keep the infected at bay. They make it to the stairwell, taking the steps two at a time. The roof access door gives way under their combined weight. They spill out onto the helipad, the pre-dawn sky a lightning grey above them. But their relief is short-lived. The door behind them bursts open, infected pouring out. They back up to the edge of the helipad, the UV light their only defense. Anyone got a plan B? Zack asks, his voice tight. James is about to respond when a spotlight suddenly illuminates them from above. The whir of helicopter blades cuts through the air. A voice booms from a loudspeaker. This is Sergeant Renfield, British Army. Hold your position. Extraction is inbound. As a ladder descends from the helicopter, James allows himself a moment of relief. They've done it. They've rescued Dr. Collins and her vital research. But as they climb to safety, leaving the infected behind, James can't shake a nagging feeling. This rescue was too convenient, too well-timed. Someone knew they were coming. As the helicopter lifts off, carrying them away from the besieged hospital, James looks out over the ravaged city. Somewhere out there, Malcolm Sinclair is moving forward with his plans. And now, with Dr. Collins in play, the stakes have just gotten higher. The game is changing, evolving just like the virus. And James knows that the real battle is only just beginning. Chapter 8, Project Sunlight. The makeshift lab in the tower's basement hums with energy as Dr. Sarah Collins hunches over a microscope, her brow furrowed in concentration. James watches her work, his mind racing with questions. It's been 2 days since their daring rescue from St. Thomas's Hospital, and he's eager to learn what makes the doctor's research so valuable. Emily paces nearby, her restless energy palpable. "Dr. Collins," she says, "I know you've been through a lot, but we need to know what you were working on. Why were Sinclair's people so interested in you?" Sarah straightens, rubbing her tired eyes. "It's complicated," she says, "but I suppose I owe you an explanation after what you risked to get me out." She takes a deep breath. "What do you know about Project Sunlight?" James and Emily exchange glances. "Not much," James admits. "We know it's who funded research into potential treatments for the Harron virus. But the details are classified." Sarah nods. "That's the official story. The reality is, well, it's both more promising and more dangerous than anyone's letting on." She gestures to a series of petri dishes. "We've been studying the virus's reaction to UV radiation. It's not just that the infected are vulnerable to sunlight, there's something more fundamental at play." She pulls up a series of complex molecular diagrams on a nearby computer screen. "The virus mutates rapidly, which is why it's been so hard to develop a cure. But we discovered that certain frequencies of UV light can actually stabilize the virus's genome, making it vulnerable to targeted treatments." James leans in, studying the diagrams. "So you're saying you've found a way to stop the mutations?" "In theory, yes," Sarah says, "but it's not that simple. The treatment would need to be tailored to each individual's genetic makeup, and the equipment required. It's far beyond anything we have access to here in the quarantine zone." Emily's eyes narrow. "Is that what Sinclair's after, this treatment?" Sarah shakes her head, her expression grim. "No, I'm afraid it's much worse. Sinclair doesn't want to cure the virus. He wants to control it." The implications hit James like a physical blow.
"The stolen research data," he says.
"It wasn't just about finding a cure, it was about weaponizing the virus." Sarah nods. "Exactly. With the right modifications, the virus could be used to enhance human abilities, strength, speed, healing. But the cost," she shudders, "the cost would be unthinkable." James's mind races, pieces falling into place. This is why the Whole sent him in, not just to recover stolen data, but to stop a potential catastrophe. "Dr. Collins," he says carefully, "how close is Sinclair to achieving this?" Before Sarah can answer, an alarm blares through the tower. Emily rushes to a nearby comm panel. "Report!" A panicked voice comes through. "Enforcers, they've breached the outer defenses. They're heading for the lab." James is already moving, checking his weapon. "How did they find us?" Emily shakes her head, her face a mask of anger and worry. "I don't know, but we need to move now. Dr. Collins, grab what you need, we're evacuating." They hurry to gather the most critical research materials as the sounds of fighting grow closer. James can hear the distinctive crack of the Enforcers' military-grade weapons mixed with the improvised firearms of the tower's defenders. They're halfway up the stairs when the lab door bursts open. James spins, weapon raised, coming face to face with a tall, broad-shouldered man in combat gear. The patch on his shoulder marks him as a commander. "Well, well," the man says, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Dr. Collins Sinclair sends his regards. Blackwood," Emily spits the name like a curse. James doesn't hesitate. He opens fire, forcing Blackwood and his men to take cover. "Go," he shouts to Emily and Sarah. "Get to the roof, I'll hold them off." What follows is a chaotic running battle through the tower. James uses every trick in his arsenal, using the familiar terrain to his advantage. He sets traps, creates diversions, anything to slow down the enforcers and give the others time to escape. He's almost to the roof when a burst of gunfire catches him in the side. James stumbles, pain lancing through him. He grits his teeth, pushing through it. He can't fail now. James bursts onto the roof to find Emily and Sarah near the edge, looking desperate. "The helicopter's not here," Emily says. Something must have gone wrong with the extraction plan. The roof access door splinters as Blackwood and his men try to break through. They're out of time and out of options. Sarah looks at the vials of research samples in her hand, then at James and Emily. Her expression hardens with resolve. "I can't let this fall into Sinclair's hands," she says.
Before they can stop her, Sarah hurls the vials over the edge of the roof.
They shatter on the pavement far below, the precious samples lost forever. Blackwood bursts onto the roof, his face contorted with rage. No, he roars, seeing the destroyed samples. James uses the moment of distraction to his advantage. He tackles Blackwood, sending them both rolling across the roof. They grapple, trading blows. Blackwood is stronger, but James is quicker, fueled by desperation and training. A knee to the gut sends James reeling. Blackwood looms over him, drawing a wicked-looking combat knife. "Nothing personal," he growls, "just following orders." But before he can strike, a blinding light bathes the roof. The whir of helicopter blades drowns out all other sound. "This is the British Army," a voice booms over a loudspeaker. "Stand down immediately." In the confusion, James sees his chance. He sweeps Blackwood's legs out from under him, sending the big man crashing to the ground. A swift strike to the temple knocks him unconscious. As army troops rappel onto the roof, securing Blackwood and his men, James stumbles to Emily and Sarah. "You okay?" he manages, the adrenaline fading and the pain of his wounds making itself known. They nod, looking shaken but alive. As medics swarm around them, James finds his gaze drawn to the soldier coordinating the operation. There's something familiar about him. The soldier approaches, removing his helmet. "James Harrington?" he says. "I'm Sergeant Jack Renfield. We've got a lot to talk about." James nods wearily. The sudden appearance of the army, Renfield knowing his name, it all points to one thing. His cover is blown. The question is, what happens next? As they're ushered onto the waiting helicopter, James looks out over the chaos of the tower, the signs of battle still fresh. They've survived this fight, but he knows it's far from over. Sinclair is still out there, and now he'll be more desperate than ever. The helicopter lifts off, carrying them away from the tower and into an uncertain future. James meets Sarah's eyes, seeing his own mix of determination and fear reflected there. Whatever comes next, he knows one thing for certain: the fate of London, and perhaps the world, now hangs in the balance. Chapter 9. Traitor in the Ranks. The military compound buzzes with activity as James Harrington paces the confines of his makeshift quarters. It's been 3 days since the dramatic rescue from the tower, and he feels like a caged animal. Sergeant Renfield has been tight-lipped about their next moves, insisting on waiting for orders from higher up. A knock at the door interrupts his brooding. "Come in," James calls out. Emily enters, her face a mask of barely contained frustration. "Any news?" she asks. James shakes his head. "Nothing." Renfield still playing everything close to the chest. Emily slumps into a chair, running a hand through her short-cropped hair. "This doesn't feel right, James. The timing of the army's arrival, Blackwood knowing exactly where to find us. There's more going on here than they're telling us." James nods, his own suspicions bubbling to the surface. "I've been thinking the same thing. Someone had to have tipped off the enforcers about Dr. Collins being at the tower. A heavy silence falls between them as the implication sinks in. Emily's voice is low when she speaks again. "You think we have a mole. It's not a question, but James answers anyway. I think we need to consider the possibility. The question is, who?" They spend the next hour going over every member of Emily's core group, analysing recent events for any signs of betrayal. It's a grim exercise, casting suspicion on people they've come to trust with their lives. "What about Dr. Pemberton?" James asks, recalling the WHO official who had been his primary contact before entering the zone. Emily frowns. "The Who guy. He's been communicating with us sporadically, offering guidance on managing the outbreak." "Why?" James chooses his words carefully. Something about the timing of his communications doesn't sit right with me. Has he ever asked for specific information about our operations or doctor? Collins's work. Emily's eyes widen as she pulls out a tablet, scrolling through messages. Now that you mention it, yes. He was particularly interested in our supply run schedules and the details of our research facilities. A cold feeling settles in James's gut. We need to talk to Dr. Collins now. They find Sarah in the compound's lab, poring over data with a mix of frustration and determination. She looks up as they enter, her exhaustion evident. Dr. Collins, James says without preamble, what can you tell us about Dr. Oliver Pemberton? Sarah's brow furrows. Pemberton. He was the WHO liaison for Project Sunlight. Brilliant mind, but... She hesitates. But what? Emily presses. Sarah sighs. There were rumours towards the end that he was pushing the research in ethically questionable directions. Nothing I could prove, but it made me uncomfortable. James and Emily exchange glances. Sarah, James says gently, we think there might be a traitor in our ranks, someone who's been feeding information to Sinclair, maybe even to the enforcers. Sarah's face pales. You think it's Pemberton? We're not sure, Emily says, but we need to find out. Can you think of anything? Any communication from him that seemed off? Sarah is quiet for a long moment, then her eyes widen. There was one thing. Just before the attack on St. Thomas's, I received a message from Pemberton. He wanted me to upload all our research data to a secure server. Said it was for safekeeping. I didn't have time before the infected breached the hospital. James feels the pieces clicking into place. He was trying to get the data before Sinclair could, but why? Their discussion is interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Renfield. Mr. Harrington, Miss Foster, Dr. Collins, we've just received word. Dr. Pemberton is en route. He wants a full briefing on our situation. James tenses, his instincts screaming danger. When does he arrive? Within the hour, Renfield replies. As Renfield leaves, James turns to Emily and Sarah. This is our chance to get answers, but we need to be careful. If Pemberton is working with Sinclair, he's dangerous. They quickly formulate a plan. Sarah will meet with Pemberton, ostensibly to brief him on her research progress. James and Emily will observe from an adjacent room, ready to intervene if necessary. The tension is palpable as they wait for Pemberton to arrive. James can feel the weight of his sidearm, hoping he won't need to use it, but prepared for the worst. Finally, Dr. Oliver Pemberton strides into the compound, every inch the distinguished scientist. But James notices the tightness around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. This is a man under pressure. From their hidden vantage point, James and Emily watch as Sarah greets Pemberton. The conversation starts innocuously enough, with Pemberton asking about Sarah's progress and well-being. But then the questions become more pointed. Dr. Collins, I need to know exactly what data you were able to salvage from St. Thomas's. It's crucial that we recover every bit of research on the virus's mutations. Sarah hesitates, clearly uncomfortable. Dr. Pemberton, I'm not sure I understand. The WHO's priority has always been developing a cure, not studying mutations. Pemberton's facade cracks just for a moment. The situation has changed, Sarah. We need to consider alternative applications for our research. James tenses, ready to move. But Emily holds him back, shaking her head. They need more. Sarah's voice is cold when she responds. Alternative applications, like weaponizing the virus. Is that why you've been feeding information to Sinclair? Pemberton's eyes widen in shock, then narrow dangerously. You don't understand the potential here. It could revolutionize human evolution. Yes, there are risks, but the rewards are not worth the costs, Sarah interrupts. How many people have died because of your alternative applications? Oliver Pemberton's composure shatters. He lunges forward, grabbing Sarah's arm. You short-sighted fool. Do you have any idea what's at stake? James bursts into the room, weapon drawn. Let her go, Pemberton, it's over. For a tense moment, Pemberton looks like he might do something desperate. But then his shoulders slump, the fight going out of him. As Renfield's men secure Pemberton, Emily turns to James, her face a mix of relief and renewed determination. So now we know. But this is bigger than just Pemberton, isn't it? James nods grimly. Much bigger. If the WHO has been compromised, we can't trust anyone outside this room. Sarah joins them, rubbing her arm where Pemberton grabbed her. What do we do now? James looks between them. These allies he's come to trust against all odds. Now, we take the fight to Sinclair. We find his lab, we destroy his research, and we put an end to this nightmare once and for all. As they begin to plan their next move, James can't shake the feeling that they're on the precipice of something monumental. The lines between friend and foe have been blurred, the stakes raised higher than ever. But one thing is clear. The final confrontation is coming. And James is determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Chapter 10, Parliament of Shadows. The Houses of Parliament loom before them, a twisted shadow of its former grandeur. In the pale moonlight, James can see the scars of the outbreak, shattered windows, makeshift fortifications, and the ever-present signs of decay that mark the quarantine zone. Fitting, isn't it? Emily murmurs beside him. Sinclair setting up shop in the seat of government. James nods grimly. A kingdom for a would-be king. Their small team is gathered in the shadows of Westminster Bridge. Besides James and Emily, there's Sarah, her medical kit at the ready, and Zack, his customary bat replaced with a silenced pistol for this mission. Remember the plan, James says softly. We get in, find Sinclair's research lab, destroy everything and get out. With any luck, we'll catch the bastard too. They move silently across the bridge, years of surviving in the zone evident in their cautious, coordinated movements. As they near the Parliament buildings, James holds up a fist, signalling a halt. Ahead, two Guardian patrols cross paths, exchanging quiet words before moving on. James waits until they're out of sight before gesturing the team forward. They reach a side entrance, surprisingly unguarded. Too easy, James thinks, his instincts screaming caution. But they have no choice. This is their best shot at infiltrating Sinclair's stronghold. Zack makes quick work of the lock, and they slip inside. The interior of the Parliament is a study in contrasts, ornate decorations and historical artefacts juxtaposed against hastily erected barricades and modern military equipment. They move through shadowy corridors, avoiding pools of light from sporadic emergency lamps. James leads, his senses on high alert for any sign of danger. As they pass the entrance to the House of Commons chamber, Sarah suddenly grabs James's arm. "Look," she whispers, pointing through the partially open door. James peers in, his blood running cold at the sight. The historic chamber has been transformed into a macabre laboratory. Gurneys line the floor where MPs once debated, each holding a test subject in various stages of mutation. Scientists in hazmat suits move between them, taking notes and administering injections. "My God," Emily breathes. "He's really doing it. Weaponizing the virus." James nods, his jaw set. "All the more reason to shut this down. Come on, we need to find the main lab." They continue deeper into the building, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional distant sound of voices or equipment. As they round a corner, James suddenly holds up a hand, stopping the group. Ahead, two guards stand outside a heavy metal door, the words "Restricted Area" stenciled in red. "That has to be it," Sarah whispers. "Sinclair's personal lab." James assesses the situation quickly. "Zack, with me. We'll take them out quietly. Emily, Sarah, watch our backs." With practiced efficiency, James and Zack subdue the guards before they can raise an alarm. But as James reaches for the door handle, a klaxon suddenly blares to life. "Intruder alert! All personnel to battle stations." "Shit," Zack curses. "How did they know? There's no time to wonder." The sound of booted feet approaches rapidly from both directions. "Into the lab now," James shouts, throwing open the door. They rush inside, slamming the door behind them. James quickly surveys the room, banks of computers, complex equipment he doesn't recognize, and at the center, a sealed chamber glowing with an eerie blue light. "Destroy everything," James orders. "We can't let Sinclair keep this research." They set to work, smashing equipment and setting fire to documents. Sarah moves to a computer terminal, her fingers flying over the keys as she attempts to delete the digital records. The door shudders under heavy impact. They won't have long. As James overturns a table of vials and petri dishes, a slow clap echoes through the room. He spins, weapon raised, to see a figure emerging from a hidden door at the back of the lab. "Bravo, Mr. Harrington," the man says, his cultured voice at odds with the chaos around them. "I must say, I've been looking forward to this meeting." Malcolm Sinclair steps fully into view, his expensive suit incongruous in the trash laboratory. He looks every inch the politician he once was, but there's a manic gleam in his eyes that sends a chill down James's spine. "Sinclair," James growls, "it's over. We're destroying your work." Sinclair chuckles, seemingly unconcerned. "Oh, I think not. You see, you're not destroying my work. You're completing it." With a gesture, the sealed chamber in the center of the room hisses open. A thick mist spills out, quickly filling the lab. "What have you done?" Sarah cries, coughing as she inhales the mist. "Given you a front-row seat to the future," Sinclair says, donning a gas mask. "This aerosol contains my latest creation, a strain of the virus that enhances human abilities without the loss of cognitive function. You should feel honored. You'll be the first to experience true evolution." James feels his heart racing, his senses sharpening to an almost painful degree. He can hear the individual heartbeats of his teammates, smell the fear rolling off them in waves. "Why?" he manages to ask, fighting against the changes he can feel happening within his body. Sinclair's eyes gleam with fanatical intensity. "Because humanity is weak, Mr. Harrington. We face threats we can't hope to overcome as we are. Climate change, overpopulation, war, we need to evolve to survive. And I will be the architect of that evolution." The door finally gives way under the assault from outside. Guardian soldiers pour in, weapons raised. "Take them," Sinclair orders. "Alive if possible. They'll make excellent test subjects." What follows is a blur of violence and superhuman feats. James moves with impossible speed, his enhanced strength sending Guardian soldiers flying. Emily and Zach are similarly affected, fighting with a ferocity that borders on animalistic. Sarah, less combat-oriented, huddles behind an overturned desk, frantically working on a computer terminal. "I can synthesize an inhibitor," she shouts over the chaos. "I just need time." James nods, redoubling his efforts to keep the Guardians at bay. But he can feel the virus working its way through his system, the rush of power tempered by a growing primal rage. Sinclair watches the battle with detached interest, making notes on a tablet. "Fascinating," he murmurs. "The aggression response is even more pronounced than I anticipated." Just as James feels he's about to lose control completely, Sarah cries out in triumph. "Got it! Everyone, cover your faces." She throws a beaker into the center of the room. It shatters, releasing a fine mist that mingles with the lingering viral aerosol. Almost immediately, James feels the enhancements fading, his mind clearing. Sinclair's eyes widen in alarm. "No. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Taking advantage of the confusion, James charges Sinclair, tackling him to the ground. They grapple briefly, but Sinclair is no match for James's combat training. As James subdues Sinclair, Emily and Zach finish off the remaining Guardians. For a moment there's silence broken only by heavy breathing and the crackle of small fires. "We need to go," Emily says urgently. "This place will be swarming with Sinclair's people any minute." James nods, hauling Sinclair to his feet. "He's coming with us." The WHO will want to have a long chat with him. As they make their way out of the Parliament buildings, alarms blaring around them, James can't shake the memory of the virus-induced rage. The power had been intoxicating, terrifying in its intensity. Sinclair, as if reading his thoughts, speaks softly. "You felt it, didn't you, Mr. Harrington? The potential. This isn't over. The world will see the necessity of my work." James says nothing, but his grip on Sinclair's arm tightens. As they emerge into the night air, Big Ben tolling mournfully in the distance, he knows that Sinclair is right about one thing. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 11, Daughter of Chaos. The cool night air is a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside Parliament as James and his team emerge, a captive Malcolm Sinclair in tow. But their relief is short-lived. "Stop right there!" A voice rings out, followed by the distinctive sound of a shotgun being cocked. James whirls, pushing Sinclair behind him and raising his weapon in one fluid motion. He finds himself face to face with a young woman, her features a striking echo of Sinclair's. Her clothes are practical, battle-worn, a far cry from Sinclair's polished appearance. But it's her eyes that catch James's attention, fierce, intelligent, and filled with a storm of conflicting emotions. "Amelia," Sinclair says, his voice a mix of surprise and something that might be genuine affection. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Hello, Father," Amelia replies, her tone icy. Her gaze flicks between Sinclair and James's group. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on here?" Emily steps forward, hands raised placatingly. "We're not your enemies, Amelia. Your father has been conducting dangerous experiments, weaponizing the virus. We're trying to stop him." Amelia's laugh is bitter. "Stop him! You have no idea what you're dealing with." He's always 10 steps ahead. As if on cue, alarms begin blaring from inside Parliament. The sound of breaking glass and inhuman shrieks fills the air. Sinclair smiles, a chilling sight. "Right on schedule. I'm afraid our reunion will have to be cut short, my dear. Mr. Harrington, you have a choice to make. You can try to escort me out of the quarantine zone, or you can save as many lives as possible from what's coming. You can't do both." James's mind races. He glances at Amelia, seeing the conflict in her eyes. What's he talking about? What's coming? Amelia's shoulders slump slightly. The Evolved, his latest creations, faster, stronger, and a hell of a lot smarter than your average infected. And he's just released them all. The gravity of the situation hits James like a physical blow. He turns to Emily and Sarah. "Get Sinclair out of here. Take him to the extraction point. Zach, you're with me. We need to contain this outbreak." "Wait," Amelia interjects. "You can't just leave." "I know where he keeps his research, the core of his work. If you really want to stop him, that's what you need to destroy." James hesitates, studying Amelia intently. Is this a trap? Or a genuine offer of help from someone who's seen the horror of Sinclair's work up close? Sinclair chuckles. "Oh, very good, Amelia. Sowing seeds of doubt. You always were a quick study." "Shut up," Amelia and James say in unison. James makes his decision. "All right, Emily, Sarah, get Sinclair out. Zach, you're still with me. Amelia, lead the way." As Emily and Sarah depart with a protesting Sinclair, James, Zach and Amelia plunge back into the chaos of Parliament. The once grand halls are now a war zone. The Evolved move with terrifying speed and coordination, overwhelming Sinclair's own guards. "This way," Amelia shouts over the din, leading them down a side corridor. His private lab is in the old House of Lords chamber. They fight their way through, James marvelling at Amelia's skill. She moves with the grace of a trained fighter, but there's a recklessness to her actions that speaks of deep-seated anger. They reach the House of Lords, its ornate decorations now serving as a backdrop to Sinclair's madness. Banks of computers and strange, pulsing organic material fill the room. "There," Amelia points to a central server bank. "That's the heart of his research network. Destroy that and you set him back years." As Zach moves to plant explosives, James turns to Amelia. Why are you helping us? He's your father." Amelia's face twists with emotion. "He stopped being my father the day he decided his vision was more important than humanity. I've seen what his work does to people. It has to end." A crash from the entrance cuts off further conversation. The Evolved have found them. What follows is a desperate battle. The Evolved are like nothing James has ever faced. They anticipate moves, coordinate their attacks, and show no fear. It takes every ounce of skill and experience he has just to stay alive. Amelia fights at his side, her shotgun booming in the enclosed space. There's a fluidity to their teamwork that surprises James, as if they've fought together for years instead of minutes. Charge is set. Zack yells over the chaos. "We need to move." They retreat, fighting every step of the way. James can see the exit, tantalizingly close, but the Evolved are closing in, their inhuman shrieks filling the air. Amelia suddenly stops. "Go," she says, her voice filled with grim determination. "I'll hold them off." James grabs her arm. "No way. We leave together or not at all." For a moment, Amelia's tough exterior cracks, revealing a vulnerability that makes her look achingly young. Then her resolve hardens. "Fine, but we do this my way." She pulls out a grenade, not a standard explosive, but something cobbled together from lab equipment. "Little surprise I've been working on. Should slow them down." James nods. "On 3, 1, 2, 3. Amelia throws the grenade as they sprint for the exit. The explosion behind them is accompanied by unearthly screams of pain and rage. They burst out of Parliament just as Zack's charges detonate. The grand old building shudders, flames licking at its windows. For a moment they stand there, gasping for breath, the weight of what they've done settling over them. "It's not over," Amelia says quietly. "He'll have backups, contingencies." James nods. "I know, but it's a start." He looks at her appraisingly. "What will you do now?" Amelia's gaze is distant, focused on the burning Parliament. "I don't know. I've spent so long fighting against him, I'm not sure I know how to do anything else." "Come with us," James finds himself saying. "We could use someone with your knowledge, your skills." Amelia hesitates, clearly torn. Then slowly she nods. "All right. But don't expect me to play nice with dear old Dad when we catch up to your friends." As they make their way through the chaotic streets, the sounds of battle echoing behind them, James can't help but feel they've turned a corner. With Sinclair captured and Amelia on their side, they might just have a chance of ending this nightmare. But as Big Ben tolls mournfully in the distance, a counterpoint to the shrieks of the infected, James knows the hardest part of their journey is still to come. The battle for London and perhaps the world is far from over. Chapter 12, Thames Crossing. The murky waters of the Thames lap against the shore as James, Zack and Amelia approach the makeshift dock. The river, once a bustling thoroughfare of commerce and tourism, now serves as a treacherous moat, separating different factions within the quarantine zone. "There," Zack points to a battered police boat moored nearby. "That's our ticket across." As they move towards the vessel, a voice calls out from the shadows. "Oi, where do you think you're going?" A figure emerges, rail thin, with wild eyes and a harpoon gun slung across his back. James tenses, ready for a fight, but Amelia steps forward. "Easy, Finn," she says, her voice soothing. "We need to cross. It's important." Finn's eyes narrow, darting between them suspiciously. "Amelia, thought you was with your dad's lot." His gaze settles on James and Zack. "Who are they then?" "Friends," Amelia says firmly. "We need to get to the tower. You know I'm good for payment." Finn hesitates, then nods reluctantly. "All right, but be quick about it. River's not safe after dark." As they board the boat, James gives Amelia a questioning look. She shrugs. "You meet all kinds in the zone. Finn's crazy, but he knows the river better than anyone." Finn takes the helm, guiding the boat away from the shore with practiced ease. The engine's low rumble seems obscenely loud in the eerie quiet that has fallen over London. As they move further into the river, James scans the shoreline. The iconic landmarks of London, the London Eye, St. Paul's Cathedral, Tower Bridge looming ahead, are shadowy silhouettes against the night sky. It's a surreal sight, the grandeur of the city juxtaposed against the devastation of the outbreak. "So," Zack says, breaking the tense silence, "what's waiting for us at the tower? Last I heard, Blackwood and his enforcers weren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat for visitors." Amelia's expression darkens. "They're not. But the tower has something we need, a secure communications array. If we can access it, we might be able to contact the outside world, let them know what's really been happening in the zone." James nods, seeing the logic. But before he can respond, Finn's urgent whisper cuts through the night. "Quiet. Kill the lights." They plunge into darkness as Finn cuts the engine, letting the boat drift. For a moment, there's nothing but the gentle lapping of water against the hull. Then James hears it, a sound unlike anything he's encountered before, a wet, gurgling screech that sends chills down his spine. "What the hell was that?" Zack whispers. Finn's voice is grim. "Riverwalkers. Nasty buggers. Your lot must have stirred 'em up with all that ruckus at Parliament." As if on cue, something heavy thuds against the side of the boat. James peers over the edge, his night vision goggles revealing a horror he was unprepared for. The creature clinging to the boat is vaguely humanoid, but grotesquely mutated. Its skin is pale and scaled, with webbed hands ending in vicious claws. But it's the face that truly unsettles James. Fish-like eyes bulging from a too-wide mouth filled with needle-sharp teeth. "How is this possible?" James breathes, unable to tear his gaze away from the monstrosity. "The virus," Amelia says, her voice tight with tension. "It adapts, mutates. The infected that fell into the river. This is what they became." The riverwalker lets out another gurgling shriek, and suddenly the water around the boat is alive with thrashing forms. "Go," James shouts to Finn. Full speed. Finn doesn't need to be told twice. He guns the engine, the sudden acceleration nearly throwing them off their feet. But the riverwalkers are fast, keeping pace with unnatural speed. What follows is a desperate battle on the churning waters of the Thames. James and Zack fire at the creatures attempting to clamber aboard, while Amelia wields Finn's harpoon gun with deadly accuracy. "We're not going to make it," Zack yells over the din, slamming a fresh magazine into his weapon. James scans the river frantically, looking for any advantage. His eyes lock onto a familiar silhouette ahead, Tower Bridge. "Finn!" he shouts. "The bridge, can you get us under it?" Finn grins maniacally. "Hold on to your arses." The boat swerves sharply, heading straight for the narrow gap between the bridge's supports. The riverwalkers pursue, their inhuman shrieks echoing off the water. "Everyone down!" James orders as they approach the bridge. They duck, just as Finn steers them under the low-hanging structure. There's a sickening series of thuds as several riverwalkers, unable to stop their momentum, slam into the unyielding stone. They emerge on the other side, the pursuit thinned but not ended. The Tower of London looms ahead, its ancient walls now bristling with modern defences. "Almost there," Finn calls out, but his triumphant cry is cut short as a riverwalker launches itself from the water, crashing into him and sending them both overboard. "Finn!" Amelia cries, rushing to the railing. James grabs her arm, holding her back. "We can't help him. Get us to shore." With grim determination, Amelia takes the helm. The shoreline approaches rapidly, but so do the remaining riverwalkers, their claws scrabbling at the boat's hull. "Brace for impact," Amelia yells. The boat slams into the shore with bone-jarring force. They're thrown clear, landing hard on the muddy bank. James rolls to his feet, weapon ready, as the riverwalkers close in. But before the creatures can reach them, the night erupts with gunfire. Spotlight beams cut through the darkness, forcing the riverwalkers to retreat with agonized screeches. As the echoes fade, James finds himself and his companions surrounded by armed figures in combat gear. The insignia on their uniforms is unmistakable: enforcers. A tall, broad-shouldered man steps forward, his scarred face twisted in a mixture of surprise and suspicion. James recognizes him immediately. Commander Blackwood. "Well, well," Blackwood says, his gravelly voice carrying an edge of menace. "Looks like we've caught ourselves some very interesting fish." As they're surrounded, James meets Amelia's eyes. There's fear there, but also determination. They've made it to the tower, but he knows their ordeal is far from over. The ancient fortress looms over them, its walls holding secrets and dangers yet to be faced. As they're led inside, James can't shake the feeling that they're walking into the lion's den. But they have no choice. The fate of London, and perhaps the world, hangs in the balance. Whatever comes next, they'll face it together. Chapter 13. Uneasy Alliance. The ancient stones of the Tower of London's innermost chamber seem to absorb the tense silence that has fallen over the room. James Harrington stands at one end of a long table, his posture rigid, eyes locked with Commander Blackwood's across the expanse of scarred wood. Amelia and Zack flank James, while Blackwood is surrounded by his top enforcer lieutenants. The air is thick with suspicion and barely contained hostility. Blackwood breaks the silence, his gravelly voice echoing off the stone walls. "So, Harrington, you've got some nerve showing up here after the stunt you pulled at Parliament." James meets his gaze steadily. "We did what was necessary to stop Sinclair. You've seen what his experiments are capable of." The Riverwalkers are just the beginning. A muscle twitches in Blackwood's jaw. "And in the process you've upset the delicate balance we've maintained in the zone. Do you have any idea how hard it's been to keep order?" Amelia steps forward, her eyes flashing. "Order? Is that what you call it? Terrorizing survivors, hoarding supplies." "Amelia!" James warns softly, placing a hand on her arm. He turns back to Blackwood. "Commander, I understand your position, but the situation has changed. Sinclair's work threatens not just the zone, but potentially the entire world. We need to put aside our differences and work together." Blackwood scoffs. "Work together? Give me one good reason why I shouldn't throw you in a cell and be done with it." James leans forward, his voice slow and intense. "Because we know where Sinclair's core research is hidden. The data that could lead to a cure, or to something far worse if it falls into the wrong hands. But we can't get to it without your help." A heavy silence falls over the room as Blackwood considers this. Finally he speaks. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A joint operation," James says. "Your enforcers have the manpower and the firepower we need. We have the intel and the scientific expertise to make sense of what we find. Together, we might just have a chance of ending this nightmare." Blackwood's eyes narrow. "And what happens after? Assuming we succeed, what's to stop you from turning on us?" James holds his gaze. "You have my word. We get the data, we work on a cure, and we find a way to lift the quarantine. Everyone wins." "Your word," Blackwood laughs humorlessly. "The word of a who, spook, and Sinclair's daughter. That's not much to go on." Zack, who has been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly speaks up. "Look, mate, none of us like this situation, but out there." He gestures towards the window where the glow of distant fires illuminates the night sky. "It's getting worse by the hour. We can stand here measuring dicks all night, or we can do something about it. Your call." Blackwood's face darkens at Zack's blunt words, but James sees a flicker of something in the commander's eyes. Uncertainty, fear. Whatever it is, it's enough to push him towards a decision. "Fine," Blackwood growls. "We'll do this your way, Harrington, but I want full disclosure. No secrets, no hidden agendas, and my people are in charge of the operation. Clear?" James nods. "Crystal. What follows is a flurry of activity as both sides come together to plan the operation. Maps are spread out, intelligence is shared, and strategies are debated. The target, a hidden laboratory beneath Canary Wharf, where Sinclair reportedly kept his most sensitive research. As the night wears on, James finds himself impressed, despite his initial misgivings. Blackwood, for all his brutality, is a skilled tactician. The enforcers, while ruthless, are undeniably effective. Amelia proves invaluable, her insider knowledge of Sinclair's operations filling in crucial gaps. Zach's street-level understanding of the zone's geography helps refine their infiltration route. By dawn, they have a plan. It's risky, with a dozen ways it could go wrong, but it's the best shot they have. As the others disperse to begin preparations, Blackwood pulls James aside. "I meant what I said about no secrets, Harrington. If I get even a whiff of betrayal..." James meets his gaze steadily. "Understood, Commander. But it goes both ways. We're in this together now, for better or worse." Blackwood nods grimly, then turns away to bark orders at his men. The next 24 hours are a whirlwind of preparation. James watches as his small team integrates with the enforcer units, an uneasy alliance born of desperate necessity. Zach works with the enforcer tech specialists, adapting their communications to avoid detection by Sinclair's systems. His easy charm seems to break through some of the initial hostility, and soon he's trading jokes with the hardened soldiers. Amelia pores over blueprints and security protocols, her intimate knowledge of her father's paranoia proving crucial in identifying potential traps and fail-safes. James finds himself in the armory with Blackwood, methodically checking and rechecking their weapons and equipment. They work in silence, but there's a grudging respect building between them. As the hour of the operation approaches, James gathers his core team for a final briefing. The atmosphere is tense, the weight of what they're about to attempt hanging heavy in the air. "This isn't going to be easy," James says, looking each of them in the eye. "We're going up against Sinclair's best, in the heart of his territory. But what we do today could change everything. Not just for us, not just for London, but for the whole world." Zach nods, his usual joviality replaced by grim determination. "No pressure, then?" Amelia's face is a mask of resolve. "He has to be stopped, whatever it takes." James takes a deep breath. "All right, gear up. We move out in 30 minutes." As they disperse to make their final preparations, James takes a moment to himself. He moves to a window looking out over the ravaged city. The fate of London, and perhaps humanity itself, rests on the success of this mission. The weight of responsibility is almost crushing. But as he turns back to join the others, James feels a steely resolve settling over him. They've come too far to fail now. Whatever Sinclair has planned, whatever horrors await them in that underground lab, they'll face it together. United by circumstance, bound by a common goal, this unlikely alliance might just be humanity's last hope. The clock ticks down. The final battle approaches. Chapter 14, Wembley Nightmare. The iconic arch of Wembley Stadium looms against the pre-dawn sky, a ghostly sentinel over the sprawling complex below. Once a cathedral of sport and celebration, it now stands as a monument to the nightmare that has engulfed London. James Harrington crouches behind a burned-out van, surveying the approach to the stadium. Beside him, Amelia checks her weapon for the third time in as many minutes, her face a mask of tense anticipation. Zach and a squad of enforcers flank them, while Blackwood's voice crackles over the comm, coordinating the multi-pronged assault. "Remember," James says softly, "Sinclair's lab is supposedly in the lower levels. We get in, we find the data, we get out. No unnecessary risks." Amelia's laugh is bitter. "In that place, it's all risk." James can't argue with that. Intelligence suggests that Wembley has become a hive for the infected, a breeding ground for Sinclair's most twisted experiments. The thought of what they might encounter inside sends a chill down his spine. "Approaching target's outer perimeter," Blackwood's voice comes through the comm. "All teams prepare to breach on my mark." James takes a deep breath, steeling himself. "This is it. Everyone ready." Nods all around, grim determination etched on every face. Breach, breach, breach. They move as one, a well-oiled machine born of desperate circumstances. The first line of defence falls quickly, Sinclair's human guards caught off guard by the coordinated assault. But as they penetrate deeper into the complex, the true horror of Wembley reveals itself. The concourse is a nightmare made real. Bodies in various stages of mutation hang from the ceiling, suspended by pulsing organic growths. The floor is slick with an unidentifiable substance that seems to writhe under their feet. And the smell? A cloying mixture of decay and something alien, something wrong. "Dear God," Zack breathes, his usual bravado shaken. "What has Sinclair been doing here?" As if in answer, a chorus of inhuman shrieks echoes through the structure. Shadows move in the periphery of their vision, fast and unnatural. "Incoming," James shouts. "Form up." The infected pour out of every doorway, every shadowed corner. But these are not the mindless biters they've encountered before. These creatures move with terrifying coordination, their mutations clearly designed for combat. The battle that ensues is chaotic and brutal. James finds himself fighting back-to-back with Amelia, her shotgun booming in counterpoint to his precise rifle fire. Zack's voice rises above the din, directing the enforcers with surprising authority. They push forward inch by bloody inch, descending deeper into the bowels of the stadium. The architecture becomes increasingly bizarre, organic growths merging with the building structure, creating a hybrid of man-made and biological horror. In a brief lull between waves of infected, Amelia points to a sign barely visible beneath layers of organic matter. There, lower levels access. The lab should be through there. They fight their way to the access point, sealing the heavy doors behind them. The relative quiet is almost as unnerving as the chaos they've left behind. "Everyone okay?" James asks, scanning his team. "They're battered and bloodied, but alive. For now." The descent to the lower levels is tense, every step taking them deeper into Sinclair's domain. The air grows thick and humid, the walls pulsing with an unsettling organic rhythm. They emerge into a vast chamber that must have once been a maintenance area. Now it's been transformed into something out of a madman's fever dream. Row upon row of tanks line the walls, each containing a human form in various stages of mutation. Workstations covered in arcane equipment and scrawled notes fill the center of the room. "This is it," Amelia says, her voice a horrified whisper. "My father's main lab." As they spread out to secure the area, James approaches one of the tanks. The creature inside might have once been human, but now it's something more. Its limbs are elongated, skin translucent, showing pulsing veins filled with an iridescent fluid. But it's the eyes that catch James, open and aware, filled with a silent plea. They're conscious, he realizes with dawning horror. These people, they're aware of what's happening to them. Zack curses violently, turning away from another tank. "We need to shut this down. All of it." "Wait," Amelia calls out. She's at one of the workstations, poring over a set of notes. This is it, the core of his research. The data on the virus's mutations, the formula for his enhancements, it's all here. James moves to join her, but a sudden movement catches his eye. One of the tanks is shuddering, cracks spreading across its surface. "We need to go," he says urgently. "Now." But it's too late. The tank explodes outward in a shower of glass and fluid. The creature that emerges is like nothing they've ever seen, a horrific amalgamation of human and something utterly alien. Its roar shakes the very foundations of the stadium. "Run!" James shouts, grabbing the research data. Back to the surface. What follows is a nightmarish gauntlet. They run through corridors that seem to shift and pulse around them, pursued by the relentless creature and waves of lesser infected drawn by the commotion. They burst out onto the pitch, the open air a blessed relief after the claustrophobic horror below. But their respite is short-lived. The creature emerges behind them, its massive form silhouetted against the flames now engulfing parts of the stadium. As they make a desperate sprint for the extraction point, James can't shake the image of those pleading eyes in the tanks. What horrors had Sinclair wrought in his quest for evolution? And even with the data they've recovered, can such a nightmare ever truly be undone? The whir of helicopter blades cuts through the air as their extraction arrives. As they clamber aboard, James takes one last look at Wembley. The once proud stadium, now a pyre burning against the dawn sky, a funeral for humanity's hubris. They've survived the nightmare, but James knows the true battle is just beginning. With Sinclair's research in hand, they have the key to unravelling his plans. But the cost in lives, in sanity, in their very understanding of what it means to be human, has been unimaginably high. As the helicopter lifts off, leaving the inferno of Wembley behind, James meets Amelia's eyes. He sees his own mix of determination and haunted horror reflected there. Whatever comes next, they've been changed by what they've witnessed in the bowels of that stadium. The nightmare of Wembley may be behind them, but its shadows will linger long after the flames have died out. Chapter 15. The Formula. The helicopter touches down on the roof of St. Thomas's Hospital, the downdraft whipping up eddies of debris and ash. James Harrington is the first to disembark, his muscles aching from the ordeal at Wembley, but his mind razor-sharp with focus. Amelia and Zack follow close behind, while Blackwood and his enforcers secure the perimeter. "This is where it all started," Amelia says, her voice barely audible over the dying rotor blades. "Where my father first began his work on the virus." James nods grimly. "And where we'll end it. Come on, we need to find Dr. Eliza Thornton. She's the key to understanding Sinclair's research." They descend into the hospital. The eerie quiet a stark contrast to the chaos of Wembley. The corridors are deserted, but signs of recent activity are everywhere. Hastily abandoned equipment, doors left ajar, the lingering scent of antiseptic barely masking something more sinister. As they approach the main research lab, a woman's voice rings out, tense and desperate. "Stay back! I'm warning you!" James holds up a hand, signalling the others to halt. He steps forward, hands raised. "Dr. Thornton, I'm James Harrington, with the World Health Organization. We're not here to hurt you. We need your help." A moment of tense silence, then a figure appears in the doorway. Dr. Eliza Thornton is in her late 40s, her lab coat stained and rumpled. Dark circles under her eyes, speaking of sleepless nights and relentless work. Her gaze falls on Amelia, and her eyes widen in recognition. "Amelia, what are you doing here? Your father is a monster," Amelia interrupts, her voice hard. "And we're here to stop him. But we need your help to do it." Dr. Thornton's shoulders slump, the fight going out of her. "Come in, quickly. We don't have much time. The lab is a hive of activity, centrifuges whirring and computer monitors displaying complex molecular structures. But what catches James's attention are the containment units lining one wall, each holding a sedated test subject in various stages of mutation. "My God," Zack breathes, "are they alive?" "Yes," Dr. Thornton says, her voice a mixture of pride and shame. "And the key to everything. Sinclair's grand vision." James steps closer to one of the units, studying the subject inside. Unlike the horrors they saw at Wembley, these mutations seem more controlled, purposeful. "What exactly has Sinclair been working on?" James asks, turning back to Dr. Thornton. The scientist moves to a central workstation, pulling up a series of complex diagrams. "It's called Project Chimera. The goal is to create a new strain of the virus that enhances human abilities without the loss of cognitive function. Imagine it: superhuman strength, accelerated healing, resistance to disease. The next step in human evolution. At what cost?" Amelia demands. "How many people have died for this evolution?" Dr. Thornton flinches at the accusation. "You don't understand. The potential benefits, we've seen the benefits," James interrupts. "At Wembley. Those weren't enhancements, they were abominations." "Wembley was a setback," Dr. Thornton admits. "But we've made breakthroughs since then. The formula is nearly perfected. With a few more tests we could." An alarm suddenly blares to life, red emergency lights bathing the lab in an ominous glow. "What's happening?" Zack shouts over the din. Dr. Thornton rushes to a security monitor, her face paling. It's Sinclair. He's initiated the final phase of Project Chimera. He's going to release the enhanced virus into the general population. James's blood runs cold. "How do we stop it?" "The release mechanism is in the basement level," Dr. Thornton says, "but you'll need the formula to neutralize it. It's the only thing that can counter the virus at this stage." "Where is it?" James demands. Dr. Thornton hesitates, then nods towards the containment units. "In them. The formula is bonded to their cellular structure. To synthesize it, we'd need to kill them," Amelia finishes, her voice hollow. A heavy silence falls over the lab, broken only by the insistent wail of the alarm. James looks at the sedated test subjects, then back at his team. The weight of the decision bears down on him like a physical force. These people are victims of Sinclair's madness, but their deaths could save countless lives. "There has to be another way," Zack says, voicing the thought they're all having. Dr. Thornton shakes her head. "There's no time. The virus will be released in minutes. It's them or potentially millions of others." James closes his eyes, the faces of everyone he's met in the quarantine zone flashing through his mind. Emily, Charlie, the survivors at the tower, all of them counting on him to end this nightmare. He opens his eyes, his decision made. Do it. Synthesize the formula. Amelia looks at him sharply, a mix of emotions playing across her face. But she nods, understanding the grim necessity. What follows is a blur of frantic activity. Dr. Thornton works with ruthless efficiency, extracting what she needs from the test subjects. James forces himself to watch, to bear witness to the cost of their mission. Finally, Dr. Thornton holds up a vial of iridescent liquid. This is it. The formula that can neutralize Sinclair's virus. James takes the vial, its weight far greater than its size would suggest. "Let's finish this." They race to the basement, the formula clutched tightly in James's hand. The release mechanism is a massive device, pulsing with malevolent energy. Sinclair stands before it, his back to them as he makes final adjustments. "It's over, Sinclair," James calls out. "We have the formula. Your virus ends here." Sinclair turns, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Oh, Mr. Harrington, you still don't understand, do you? This was never about the virus. It was about choice. The choice to evolve, to become something greater, at the cost of our humanity." Amelia steps forward, her voice shaking with emotion. "You're insane. Insanity is clinging to a dying world," Sinclair retorts. "I'm offering salvation." James raises the vial. "This isn't salvation, it's genocide." Sinclair's eyes narrow. "So be it. What follows is a desperate struggle." Sinclair, enhanced by his own experiments, is a formidable opponent. James and his team fight with everything they have, the fate of London, perhaps the world, hanging in the balance. In the end, it comes down to a single moment. James, battered and bleeding, lunges for the release mechanism. Sinclair moves to intercept, but Amelia tackles him, buying James the precious seconds he needs. With a final, desperate effort, James smashes the vial against the machine. The formula mixes with Sinclair's virus, neutralizing it in a spectacular chemical reaction. Sinclair lets out a howl of rage and anguish as his life's work is destroyed before his eyes. But it's over. The threat is contained. As Blackwood and his men secure Sinclair, James slumps against a wall, the adrenaline fading and the weight of what they've done settling over him. Amelia approaches, her expression unreadable. "We did it," she says softly, "but at what cost?" James looks at her, then at Zack, at Dr. Thornton being led away in handcuffs, at Sinclair raging against his captors. "I don't know," he admits, "but it was a price we had to pay." As they make their way back to the surface, James can't shake the feeling that while they've won the battle, the war is far from over. The ethical quandaries, the trauma they've endured, the lives lost, these will have consequences that will ripple out long after the quarantine is lifted. But, for now, as the first rays of dawn break over a London forever changed, there's a glimmer of hope, a chance for healing, for rebuilding, and perhaps, in time, for understanding the true cost of survival in a world pushed to the brink. Chapter 16. London's Burning. The helicopter skims low over London's skyline, the thrum of its rotors a counterpoint to the chaos unfolding below. James Harrington leans against the window, his eyes scanning the city he's come to know intimately over the past weeks. What he sees makes his blood run cold. London is burning. Columns of thick black smoke rise from dozens of locations across the city. The streets, even from this height, are alive with movement. Survivors fleeing, infected pursuing, and caught in between, the various factions fighting for control of what little remains. "My God," Amelia breathes, pressing close to look out. "What's happening down there?" Zach's voice comes through their headsets, grim and tired. "Looks like the news got out about the bombardment." James nods, his jaw clenching. After they'd neutralized Sinclair's virus, they'd learned of the government's plan, a cleansing fire to purge London of the infection once and for all, a last resort that now seems terrifyingly imminent. "We need to get to the tower," James says, "rally who we can and coordinate an evacuation." The pilot's voice crackles over the intercom. "No can do, sir. Tower's gone dark. Last transmission said they were under heavy attack from multiple directions." James exchanges a worried glance with Amelia. Emily and the others were at the tower. "If it's fallen, take us to Trafalgar Square," James orders. "It's central, defensible. We can set up a command post there." As they descend towards the square, the scale of the disaster becomes clear. The once grand public space is now a refugee camp, teeming with shell-shocked survivors. The Nelson Column stands as a grim sentinel over the scene, its base fortified with makeshift barricades. They touch down amidst a flurry of activity. James is out of the helicopter before the rotors have fully stopped, Amelia and Zach close behind. A familiar face pushes through the crowd, Charlie Watts, the young survivor James had bonded with earlier. His face is smudged with soot, his eyes wide with fear and relief. "James, you're alive!" Charlie rushes forward, then stops short, remembering himself. "It's bad, really bad. The enforcers and guardians are tearing each other apart. And the infected, they're everywhere." James puts a steadying hand on Charlie's shoulder. "Slow down. What happened to the tower?" To Emily. Charlie shakes his head. "Don't know. Communication's been spotty. Last we heard they were holding out, but—" He trails off, the implications clear. James turns to Amelia and Zach. "We need to get these people organized. Zach, see what supplies we have, what we can scrounge. Amelia, start setting up a perimeter. I'll try to make contact with any other survivor groups."
As they disperse to their tasks, James climbs atop an overturned bus to address the crowd.
"Listen up. I know you're scared. I know you've heard about the bombardment. But we're not done yet. We've got hours before the military moves in. If we work together, we can get as many people out as possible." A murmur runs through the crowd. A voice calls out, angry and desperate. "Why should we trust you? The government left us to die." "I'm not the government," James responds, his voice carrying across the square. "I'm just a man trying to save lives, same as all of you. Now who's with me?" There's a moment of tense silence, then a cheer goes up. People begin to move with purpose, organizing into groups, gathering supplies. As James climbs down, Zach approaches, his face grim. "We've got a problem. Just intercepted a military transmission. The bombardment's been moved up. We've got less than 2 hours." James curses under his breath. "All right, new plan. We need to prioritize. Get the children, the injured out first. Use any vehicle we can get running." "And go where?" Amelia asks, joining them. "The whole city's a war zone." James thinks for a moment, then nods to himself. "The Thames. We get everyone to the river, commandeer boats, barges, anything that floats. It's our best shot at getting clear of the blast zone. As they begin to implement the plan, a new complication arises. A group of enforcers, led by none other than Commander Blackwood, arrives at the square. "Harrington!" Blackwood's voice booms across the space. "We've got orders to evacuate key personnel only. Scientists, government officials. You're on the list. Come with us now, and you might just survive this." James feels the eyes of everyone in the square on him. This is the moment of truth, his mission, his duty, versus the lives of these survivors he's come to care for. He steps forward, meeting Blackwood's gaze. "No deal, Commander. I'm staying. These people need me." Blackwood's face darkens. "Don't be a fool, Harrington. You've done your part. The data's secure. Don't throw your life away for these civilians." James stands his ground. "Every life matters, Blackwood. You want to help. Stay and fight with us. Help us get these people to safety." For a long moment, Blackwood is silent. Then, to James's surprise, he nods. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the biggest idiot." "All right, Harrington. You've got the enforcers. What's the plan?" With the enforcers' help, the evacuation kicks into high gear. Vehicles are hot-wired, supplies are distributed, and a steady stream of survivors begins making its way towards the Thames. But it's not smooth sailing. Infected, drawn by the commotion, begin to converge on the square. James finds himself fighting alongside Blackwood, Amelia, and Zach, buying time for the evacuees. As they battle, James catches glimpses of individual dramas playing out around him. A mother shielding her child from a lunging biter. Charlie leading a group of younger kids to safety, his face set with determination. Amelia, fierce and focused, taking down infected with ruthless efficiency. Time seems to blur, a relentless countdown to disaster. They're down to the last group of survivors when a military jet roars overhead, a chilling reminder of what's to come. "That's it!" Zach shouts over the din. "Last group's clear." James nods, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "All right, let's move out to the river." As they run through the streets of London, buildings burning around them and the infected in pursuit, James can't help but reflect on the journey that's brought him here. From a covert operative with a clear-cut mission to a man willing to risk everything for people he barely knows. They reach the Thames, where a flotilla of mismatched vessels is waiting. As James helps the last stragglers aboard, he takes one final look at the city. London, battered and burning, but not yet defeated. The first missiles streak across the sky as their boat pulls away from the shore. James watches, his heart heavy, as the city that's become a battleground, a nightmare, and in some strange way a home, disappears behind them. The mission isn't over. There are still survivors to protect, a cure to develop, a world to save. But as dawn breaks over the river, painting the sky in hues of hope, James allows himself a moment of quiet victory. They've survived the night, London's darkest hour. And in doing so, they've kept alive the flickering flame of humanity's resilience. Whatever comes next, they'll face it together. Chapter 17, Eye of the Storm. The London Eye looms before them, its once gleaming structure now a twisted, mutated parody of its former self. Organic growths pulse along its struts, and the pods have been transformed into grotesque pulsating sacs. At its pinnacle, barely visible against the smoke-filled sky, a figure stands watching the chaos unfold across the city. Sinclair. James Harrington takes a deep breath, checking his gear one last time. Beside him, Amelia's face is a mask of grim determination. Zach fidgets nervously, eyeing the monstrosity before them. "You sure about this, mate?" Zach asks, his usual bravado subdued. "Seems like a right death trap." James nods, his jaw set. "We have to end this here and now. Sinclair's controlling the infected somehow. If we can take him out, we might just save what's left of the city," Amelia finishes. A military helicopter roars overhead, unleashing a barrage of gunfire at the eye. The bullets seem to be absorbed by the fleshy growths, doing little damage. "Well," James says, a hint of gallows humour in his voice, "at least we know the military's providing a distraction. Let's move." They approach the base of the eye, the ground squelching unnaturally beneath their feet. The entrance to the structure is a gaping maw of twisted metal and pulsing organic matter. "Remember," James says as they prepare to enter, "Sinclair's enhanced. He'll be stronger, faster. But he's not invincible. Stay focused, watch each other's backs." With a final shared look of resolve, they plunge into the nightmarish interior of the London Eye. The ascent is a harrowing test of skill and nerve. The familiar structure of stairs and maintenance ladders has been warped beyond recognition. They climb through pulsating tunnels of flesh, across gaps bridged by ropey sinews, always ascending towards the distant peak. Halfway up, they encounter the first wave of resistance. Mutated creatures, once human but now twisted into something unrecognizable, swarm from the walls. James fights with desperate intensity, his combat knife flashing in the eerie bioluminescent light. Amelia's shotgun booms, each blast taking out swaths of the monstrosities. Zack proves his worth, his parkour skills allowing him to maneuver in the bizarre environment, drawing enemies into vulnerable positions. They press on, battered but unbroken. The higher they climb, the more the structure seems to actively resist them. Tendrils lash out, trying to ensnare them. Pods burst, releasing noxious gases that burn their lungs and blur their vision. A particularly violent tremor rocks the entire structure. James loses his footing, plummeting through the air. At the last second, he manages to grab onto a protruding strut, dangling precariously over a dizzying drop. "James!" Amelia cries out, reaching for him. But before she can get to him, the military helicopter reappears, unleashing another barrage. The bullets tear through the fleshy growths around them, sending debris raining down. What follows is a pulse-pounding sequence of acrobatics and split-second decisions. James swings from strut to strut, narrowly avoiding the helicopter's fire. Amelia and Zack provide covering fire, taking out growths that threaten to ensnare him. With a final desperate lunge, James reaches relative safety, hauled up by his companions. They pause for a moment, gasping for breath. "Next time," Zack wheezes, "let's take the bloody stairs." Despite everything, they share a brief laugh. Then, resolve hardening once more, they continue their ascent. Finally, they reach the top. The central hub of the eye has been transformed into a pulsating nerve center, organic technology melded seamlessly with the structure. And there, at its heart, stands Malcolm Sinclair. But he's changed. His body ripples with unnatural muscle, veins glowing with the same bioluminescence as the growths around them. His eyes, when they fix on the group, burn with an inhuman intensity. "Ah, Mr. Harrington!" Sinclair's voice booms, deeper and more resonant than before. "Come to witness the birth of a new world order." "It's over, Sinclair," James calls out, weapon raised. "Your new world ends here." Sinclair laughs, the sound reverberating through the structure. "Oh, I don't think so. You see, I've transcended, become something more than human. Let me show you." What follows is a battle unlike anything they've faced before. Sinclair moves with impossible speed and strength, the very structure of the eye responding to his will. Tendrils lash out at James and his team, while pustules burst, spraying corrosive fluid. They fight with everything they have. James uses every trick, every skill he's learned throughout his mission. Amelia's fury at her father's madness lends her strength, her shots finding their mark, even as Sinclair's enhanced body regenerates. Zack's agility keeps him one step ahead, providing crucial distractions at key moments. But Sinclair is relentless. He shrugs off wounds that would kill a normal man, his laughter growing more maniacal with each passing moment. "Don't you see?" He roars as he backhands James, sending him crashing into a wall. "This is evolution. The strong survive, adapt, become more." James struggles to his feet, spitting blood. "You haven't evolved, Sinclair. You've become a monster. Something flickers in Sinclair's eyes, a moment of doubt of humanity. It's all the opening James needs. With a surge of adrenaline, James charges forward. He dodges Sinclair's grasp, slides under a lashing tendril, and drives his combat knife deep into the pulsing mass at the center of the hub. Sinclair screams, a sound of rage and agony that shakes the entire structure. The organic growths throughout the eye begin to wither and die. "No!" Sinclair howls. "My work, my vision." As the growths recede, the structural integrity of the eye begins to fail. Metal groans, glass shatters. "We need to go," Zack shouts. "This whole thing's coming down." James turns to Amelia, seeing the conflict in her eyes as she looks at her father. "Amelia, we have to leave him. There's no time." For a moment he thinks she might argue. Then she nods, her expression hardening. "Let's go." They begin their descent, a frantic race against the collapsing structure. Behind them, Sinclair's anguished cries fade, replaced by the rumble of destruction. They reach the ground just as the eye gives a final metallic shriek. It collapses in on itself, a twisted mass of metal and dying organic matter. For a long moment they stand there, watching as the dust settles. The symbol of Sinclair's madness, of the virus's corruption reduced to rubble. "It's over," Amelia says softly. "It's finally over?" James nods, feeling the weight of everything they've been through. "Yeah, but the work's just beginning." As if to underscore his words, a transmission crackles over their comms. It's Emily's voice, tired but alive. "James, Amelia. Anyone copy? We've got survivors gathered at Tower Bridge. The military's standing down, they're sending in relief teams." James feels a smile tugging at his lips, the first genuine one in what feels like ages. "Copy that, Emily, we're on our way." As they make their way through the battered but quieting streets of London, James reflects on the journey that's brought them here. The challenges they've faced, the losses they've endured, the bonds they forged. The sun breaks through the clouds, illuminating a city forever changed, but not defeated. There's hope on the horizon, a chance for healing, for rebuilding, and as they walk towards that future, James knows that whatever comes next, they'll face it together. As survivors, as a team, as something like family. The eye of the storm has passed. Now, the real work begins. Chapter 18. Dawn's early light. The first rays of sunlight pierce through the smoky haze hanging over London, casting a surreal glow over the battered cityscape. James Harrington stands atop the Tower Bridge control room, surveying the scene below. Survivors mill about, their faces a mix of exhaustion and cautious hope. Military and relief vehicles rumble across the bridge, a stark contrast to the eerie quiet of the past weeks. "Quite a view," Emily says, joining him. Her clothes are torn and dirty, but her eyes shine with the same resilience that's kept her group alive through the nightmare. James nods, feeling the weight of all they've been through. "Hard to believe it's finally over." Emily gives him a sidelong glance. "Is it over, I mean?" Before James can respond, Amelia's voice crackles over their comms. "James, Emily, we're ready." It's time. They make their way to the makeshift communications centre they've set up in one of the bridge's towers. Zack is there, fiddling with a jury-rigged transmitter. Dr. Sarah Collins stands nearby, clutching a folder of notes. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asks, her voice tinged with worry. "Once we broadcast, there's no going back. The world will know everything." James meets her gaze steadily. "They need to know. All of it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It's the only way to prevent something like this from happening again." Amelia nods in agreement. "My father's lies have done enough damage. It's time for the truth." With a deep breath, James steps up to the microphone. Zack gives him a thumbs up. They're live, broadcasting not just to London, but to the world. "My name is James Harrington," he begins, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "I'm speaking to you from inside the London quarantine zone. What I'm about to tell you is the truth about the outbreak, about the so-called Harran virus, and about the people who sought to use it for their own gain. Over the next hour, James lays it all out. He talks about Sinclair's experiments, the Ho's complicity, the government's plan to sacrifice the zone. But he also speaks of hope, of Dr. Collins' breakthroughs, of the resilience of the survivors, of the cure that's now within reach. The road ahead will be long, he concludes, but we've proven that even in the darkest of times, humanity's light can shine through. We survived, we endured, and together we'll rebuild. As the transmission ends, a heavy silence falls over the room. Then from outside they hear it. Cheers, applause, a rising tide of hope and relief from the survivors below. Well, Zack says, his usual smirk tempered by genuine emotion, guess that cat's out of the bag. The next few hours are a whirlwind of activity. Military officials arrive, wanting to debrief James and his team. Relief workers begin organizing large-scale evacuations. Through it all, James finds himself at the center, coordinating, advising, trying to ensure that no one gets left behind. As the day wears on, the reality of their situation begins to sink in. The quarantine will be lifted soon. People will be going home, or what's left of it. James finds Amelia standing apart from the crowd, watching the evacuation efforts with a distant expression. "Hey," he says softly, "you okay?" She turns to him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I don't know. I should be happy, right? It's over. We won. But it doesn't feel like a victory," James finishes. Amelia nods. "All those people we lost, the things we had to do to survive, how do we just go back to normal after this?" James puts a hand on her shoulder. "We don't. We move forward, carry the lessons, the memories, the pain. But we also carry the hope." Their moment is interrupted by Emily, who approaches with a grim expression. "James, we've got a problem. There are reports of infected holdouts in some of the outer boroughs. The military wants to just seal them off, write them off as casualties." James feels a familiar tension settle in his gut. He looks at the evacuation in progress, then back at Emily. He knows what he has to do. "Get me a team," he says. "Volunteers only. We're going back in." Amelia's eyes widen. "James, no, you've done enough. You can go home now. Be done with all this." He shakes his head. "I can't. Not while there are still people who need help." Word spreads quickly. Soon a small group has assembled, Zack, of course, along with a handful of survivors James has fought alongside. Even Commander Blackwood steps forward, a newfound respect in his eyes. As they prepare to head out, Dr. Collins approaches James. "I'm coming too," she says firmly. "My work isn't finished." "We need more data to perfect the cure." James nods, grateful for her dedication. The farewells are emotional. Emily hugs James tightly. "You better come back, you hear me? We've still got a city to rebuild." Charlie Watts, the young survivor who's grown so much, looks up at James with tear-filled eyes. "Will I see you again?" James kneels down to his level. "Count on it, kid. Stay strong. Keep looking out for the others." As they prepare to depart, Amelia suddenly steps forward. "I'm coming with you," she announces. James starts to protest, but the look in her eyes stops him. He sees in her the same drive, the same need to make things right that he feels. "All right," he says softly. Together, they climb into a military transport, the small team of volunteers ready to plunge back into the danger they've only just escaped. As the vehicle rumbles to life, James takes one last look at the tower bridge, at the survivors being evacuated to safety. He's made his choice. There's still work to be done. People to save, a city to reclaim from the brink. As they drive off into the uncertainties that lie ahead, James feels a mix of emotions, fear, determination, and underneath it all, a flicker of hope. Whatever comes next, they'll face it as they have everything else. Together, the dawn's early light bathes the battered city in a golden glow as they disappear into the streets of London, ready to write the next chapter in this ongoing struggle for survival, redemption, and the future of humanity. Epilogue, rebirth. 6 months have passed since the fall of Sinclair and the lifting of the London quarantine. The city, once a battleground of infected and desperate survivors, now hums with the sounds of reconstruction. Cranes dot the skyline, their silhouettes a testament to humanity's resilience and determination to rebuild. Dr. Sarah Collins stands at the window of her new laboratory, watching workers clear debris from the street below. The facility, housed in a refurbished section of St. Thomas's Hospital, is at the forefront of the global effort to understand and counteract the Harran virus. A knock at the door interrupts her reverie. "Come in," she calls. James Harrington enters, looking more rested than she's ever seen him, though the vigilant gleam in his eyes remains. "How's it coming?" Doc Sarah smiles, gesturing to a complex array of molecular models on her computer screen. "We're making progress. The data we gathered from those last holdouts was invaluable. I think we're on the verge of a true vaccine." James nods, his expression a mix of hope and caution. "That's good. We'll need it. The WHO's latest report suggests there are still infected pockets in other parts of the world." "I know," Sarah says softly, "but we're better prepared now, thanks to you, to all of us." Their conversation is interrupted by Amelia's arrival. She's traded her battle-worn clothes for a sleek suit, though James notices she still wears combat boots. Old habits die hard. "Sorry I'm late," she says. "The parliamentary hearing ran long. They're still debating the Sinclair Act." James raises an eyebrow. "How's it looking?" Amelia sighs. "It'll pass, I think. Stricter oversight on biomedical research, harsher penalties for ethical violations. It's a start." They share a moment of silence, each lost in their own thoughts about how much has changed and how much remains to be done. The scene shifts to Trafalgar Square, now a memorial to those lost in the outbreak. James walks among the newly planted trees and engraved stones, each bearing the name of a victim or survivor. He pauses at one bearing a familiar name, Finn, the river guide who sacrificed himself to get them to safety. "Thought I'd find you here," a voice says. James turns to see Zack approaching, his usual smirk softened by the solemnity of the place. "Just paying my respects," James replies. Zack nods, his eyes scanning the memorial. "Heard from Emily this morning. The tower community is thriving. They're talking about making it a permanent thing, you know, a self-sustaining urban village." James smiles. "Good for them. They've earned it." As they walk through the square, James notices a group of children playing nearby. Among them is Charlie Watts, laughing as he teaches younger kids some of the parkour moves he learned during the outbreak. The sight fills James with a bittersweet hope. "We did good, didn't we?" Zack asks, following James's gaze. "We did," James agrees, "but it's not over." Later that evening, James stands on the balcony of his small London flat, looking out over the city he's come to call home. The skyline is changed, gaps where familiar buildings once stood, new structures rising to take their place. It's a fitting metaphor, he thinks, for the transformation they've all undergone. His phone buzzes with a message from Commander Blackwood. "Situation developing in Barcelona. Possible outbreak. Need your team. Interested." James stares at the message for a long moment. Part of him longs for the quiet life he once dreamed of. But he knows that the skills he's gained, the bonds he's forged, are needed now more than ever. He types a quick reply. "Brief me in the morning. We'll be ready." As he sets the phone down, James reflects on the journey that brought him here. From a lone operative to the leader of a team, from a man focused on the mission to someone who's found a true purpose. The sun sets over London, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. In the distance, James can see the skeleton of the London Eye being rebuilt, a phoenix rising from the ashes of Sinclair's madness. The world has changed. They've all changed. But as James looks out over the city he helped save, he feels a sense of peace. Whatever challenges lie ahead, he knows they'll face them the same way they faced the horrors of the outbreak. Together, as a team, as a family. The Harran virus tried to destroy humanity, to reduce them to mindless infected. But In the crucible of that crisis, James and his companions discovered what it truly means to be human. Compassion in the face of suffering, courage in the depths of fear, hope in the darkest of nights. As the lights of London flicker to life, James Harrington allows himself a smile. The dawn of a new day approaches, bringing with it new challenges, new dangers. And he'll be ready. They all will. The end.